So hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to look at one of your favorite fanfic, What If Naruto and Female Kyuubi Were Secret Lovers, Part 2. Or we should say, What If Naruto Got Harem with a Female Kyuubi? Those who are new to this channel can watch Part 1 which I have put in the description box. And this video is not for kids, I hope you guys understand what I want to say. But before we start, please like and subscribe to the channel so that more new members can join our fanfic according to the YouTube algorithm. Now, relax and put your headset on. Here, we jumped into the story where we left off. Inside Naruto's mindscape. Naruto was sprinting through a large and dense forest, doing something akin to parkour as Kurama called it from her lifetime of memories across massive roots and fallen trunks in his path. To an uninformed bystander, it might seem like he was running from danger. Instead, he was training. His sensitive hearing picked up some faint pattering of feet and hands on the ground behind him to the right. He spared a glance behind to find two plain-looking boys his age and size running on all fours like foxes before one of them broke off and moved across to behind Naruto's left. He frowned in frustration at allowing himself to be flanked while his enemies were preparing to strike at his back simultaneously. But the split-second decision, he abruptly stopped dead in his track in the middle of the forest and prepared himself. The two boys were momentarily surprised enough that they nearly overshot him before recovering and turning on a dime to dash at him from both sides. One raised a knife hand with sharpened fingernails aimed at the boy's neck, while the other went for the blonde's legs with a sliding leg sweep. The boy smirked for an instant before hopping and twisting his body into spinning horizontally in mid-air between the stabbing hand and leg sweep, which both missed barely. As he spun, Naruto quickly whipped an arm out downward with all his might, connecting with the stabbing apparition's head to hammer it to the ground hard. The impact snapped its neck instantaneously. At the same time, he swung a leg out to the sweeping apparition, his foot almost punching a hole through its face as it was kicked back. It crashed against a tree trunk hard enough to crack the bark around it. Before it could get up, its neck was brutally smashed against the tree by a lunging elbow from Naruto. Blood and spittle spewed from its mouth as it slumped down again and stayed still. The blonde let out a small sigh of relief. "Give me a break, Kurama. I've been at this for 4 hours with those two." He grumbled out loud to no one in particular. "This will be the last round. Do well, Naruto." The demon fox's disembodied voice rolled through the forest like thunder. The two apparitions that Kurama set upon him remained still for a moment before they twitched and began to rise from their positions like zombies, their previous wounds gone. Naruto cursed before regaining his bearing and ran on all fours as fast as he could toward where he knew the forest would end. After a few minutes of running and hearing the two apparitions behind him, he suddenly broke out from the trees onto a large plain, which was covered as far as eyes could see with tall grass swaying under a gentle breeze. He caught a glimpse of the giant crimson fox Kurama in the distance, lying lazily on her side with her head propped up by an arm. Her red eyes were slowly following her host's movement. Naruto then heard rustling of the tall grass behind him and knew the two apparitions were gaining on him. He abruptly tumbled forward into a series of cartwheels and backward somersaults before finishing by landing on all fours, facing the opposite direction he was running. His body was coiled and ready for action as his eyes stared directly into the apparition's soulless eyes while they stopped at the boy's challenging pose, wary of what he was planning. He didn't want to give them any time to strategize, so he quickly dashed forward on all fours, making them tense. He let out a feral roar as he hopped just above them with both of his clawed hands slashing out in huge arcs. This forced the two boys to split up, making him smirk as his plan to divide and conquer succeeded with no issue. While the apparitions lost sight of him due to having to dodge, he landed and leapt high into the air toward one of them just before it quickly oriented itself. Having lost sight of its target, it prepared for any attack from any direction, but wasn't ready for an open hand smashing into his face from above. It felt like its head was spiked straight into the ground like a ball with a growl of exertion from Naruto, momentarily dazing it. The blonde tried to finish the boy off with a foot stomp to drive its head deeper into the soil, but had to lean back far to avoid a clawed swipe from the side from its partner. Allowing himself to backflip once to make room, he was ready for this apparition's flurry of swipes that he slipped by. Seeing an opening, he quickly grabbed an arm and pulled his enemy close to deliver a punishing spin kick to the head that knocked it to the side and sent it tumbling away. After Naruto took a quick second to catch his breath, he had to tilt his head to the side to let a knife hand slip by on his left from behind before grabbing the overextended arm and effortlessly broke it over his shoulder. The first boy ignored the loss of his left arm and tried to drive his right knee into his undefended liver from behind. The blonde was ready and spun under the broken arm, still in his grip out of the knee's range, making the apparition stumble forward due to the suddenly bad footing. As a result, he easily ended up standing behind it with his right arm wrapped tightly around its neck. The quick squeeze and yank resulted in a broken neck and the boy fell lifelessly to the ground when he let go. He didn't spare any time when he sprinted toward the remaining boy still laid out on the ground from his kick earlier and leapt high into the air. A knee crashing down on its stereo ended its life. Naruto, knowing he won, stood up slowly and allowed himself to take a breath. He had to shudder when he observed the defeated apparition's dull eyes staring up into the sky. There was no indication that it knew it was going to die, it was like seeing a puppet with its string cut. He never cared for fighting apparitions since they made his wins feel hollow, but knew this was the best way to train for the time being. "The job, Naruto. That's enough for now. Come over here and we will figure out a Kenjutsu style for you," Kurama called out from her lazy posture. The boy sighed tiredly and walked away from the two apparitions now vanishing into thin air. "Sit down and rest. I'm going to show you my memories of the styles I have seen while observing the world for thousands of years. It may take hours, even days, but there is no need to rush. Keep in mind that you must be sure that the style would fit you. Just pick out the styles that reach out to you and we'll make a list. Then we'll discuss them at the end." The great fox spoke as he sat down cross-legged and made himself comfortable. He gave an understanding nod just as Kurama snapped her fingers. The holographic projection appeared in mid-air in front of Naruto, who could see a swordsman showing off some techniques with his katana. It looked pretty plain and basic, something he knew someone with a superior style could easily pick up. He gave a shrug, indicating his disinterest. Kurama snapped her fingers again to change styles in the display. This would repeat for hours until they had to stop to allow Naruto to physically and mentally recover for the rest of that night in a deep sleep. 5 days later. Thanks to the speeding up of time in his mindscape relative to the real world, Naruto was able to train an extra 8 hours in just 2 hours of real-world time before he had to truly sleep the rest of the night. Any more than this, he wound up being too sluggish the next day. Since they began looking for the most compatible Kenjutsu style 5 days ago, the cycle of a full day of physical training and then 4 hours of mindscape training at night, followed by the remaining 4 hours used for skimming through Kurama's memories continued until now. "You seem to be finally running out of styles to show me. I can't believe how much you've seen," Naruto remarked as he continued to look over the styles cycling through on the projection. He was sitting comfortably on the grass while Kurama was lying next to him in her lazy posture, looking bored. "You can be so picky. Out of thousands I've shown you, you picked out just 4, and I'm still not quite sure they're a good match for you," she grumbled as she snapped her fingers once more, switching to another style. "I can't believe some of these styles, like that green-haired swordsman using 3 swords or that moody sissy-looking guy with the gunblade as you called it," the blonde pointed out, clearly not interested in the latest style showing on the screen, while his tenant just shrugged lazily as she snapped her fingers again. Finally, the next style caught his attention. "Wait. Stop. Please show me more of this, Kurama," he requested, seemingly fascinated with the tall and muscular man with an eye patch and a very impressive mustache displayed on the projection. The man was cutting through his enemies brutally and effortlessly with 2 thin swords. Kurama smirked as she had a feeling the boy would have been interested in this one, hence why she put off showing this style until near the end, after he had seen nearly everything else. She waved a hand, and the projection disappeared to be replaced by an apparition identical to the man previously in the display. 10 more apparitions then surrounded him with different weapons, and they attacked him all at once. Naruto had to stare in awe as the man effortlessly evaded, sliced, and stabbed all 10 apparitions in less than a minute. The man then straightened up, his swords hanging somewhat limply, but still ready, at his sides as he glared at the boy with pure intimidation. It felt to Naruto like he'd be sliced into little pieces in an instant and had to hold back a gulp. The man's expression abruptly turned blank, losing the intimidation in the process, and he then began demonstrating some stances and moves for Naruto to watch. "I can tell you like this style and I'm honestly not surprised. It is a very aggressive and fluid style. Like Raging Fox, this style does not have any decent defense since the sabers cannot stand up to repeated heavy strikes. It will require quick reflexes to parry, avoid, or counter any strike aimed at you. With enough practice, you should be able to effortlessly deflect any projectile, and you have 3 ways of using these sabers. You can slice through most things, stab with precision at a weak point, or throw them as projectiles to catch enemies by surprise," Kurama explained. "Seems like a style that would cause a lot of bloodshed. You would be able to kill anything that moves with this, but you also have a choice to disable anyone with a careful slice at a tendon or a stab through one of the joints. It can get bloody, but it will be as efficient as you want." Kurama watched the boy think deeply as he watched the man continue its demonstration for a few long minutes. "Well, this is the only style so far that really caught my attention, and I feel some sort of connection with this. I honestly don't think it's worth the time discussing the other styles I picked out earlier, and I might as well get started on learning this one. The swords, you called them sabers. They are rather unique in the elemental nations. Unlike the basic ninjato or katana, a saber is straight, usually longer, thinner, and somewhat fragile. However, the blade can either be single or double-edged, depending on how it's made. It is light, which makes it easy to slice through most things if you use enough strength. It has an effective handguard on the hilt for protecting your fingers, and you can also use it as an improvised brass knuckle for enemies up close. Due to the weapon's rarity on this continent, you may have to get them made or hope the old fart knew where they could be found. Make sure they are battle-ready when you do find some, as there may be ceremonial ones, and they're utter crap. Naruto let out a weary sigh. I wonder why I ended up liking a weapon in which its rarity may be a disadvantage on this continent. Because it'd be boring otherwise, I guess. Don't worry, there will be a place or two that at least carry some decent sabers. You just have to find them. Kurama replied with a shrug. Alright. I just hope these long swords won't come back to bite me in the ass if I get stuck fighting in any narrow corridor. You'll still have your kunai for that. Even with that, while this style will focus primarily on these swords, it will also allow you to quickly disarm your enemies and make use of their weapons to suit any environment that may prove to be disadvantageous for the sabers. Seems like the pros will outweigh the cons on this one. I'm done looking. I like this style and I'll learn it to the best of my ability. Kurama allowed a toothy grin as the demonstrating apparition vanished. Very well, Naruto. This style will cause a lot of bloodbaths. I can see my bloodlust being satiated in the future. She spoke with a somewhat sinister tone. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Sometimes I forget you're a bloodthirsty one, Kurama. He sighed with a smirk before turning serious. I'm not going to commit murder for the sake of it. I will steel myself for killing if it's to protect, but I will give them a chance to back off if the situation allows for it. Kurama let out a lazy shrug. That's fine. I don't care for my container turning into a mindless killing machine, anyway. Just remember one thing. Naruto looked up at the giant fox. Your father single-handedly killed hundreds of Iwa nins in Third Great War for the sake of protecting Konoha, which cheered this esteemed achievement. On the other hand, people in Iwa bitterly revile your father to this day for being a monster, murdering their friends, parents, and spouses. It is all about perspectives. Keep that in mind when you face your enemies. Naruto's eyes widened. He hadn't thought much about the view from Iwa's side. Even though Wagakure ignited the Third Great War, it was hard to justify that massacre. He knew from Kurama's stories that his father did not even show mercy to fleeing nin. Every enemy within his sight died, no matter what they did. Naruto allowed a small shudder as he wondered if he was going to have to do something similar in the future for the sake of protecting his precious people. Now that we're done with the search, we'll get started on learning how to properly maintain swords and some basic exercises to strengthen your arms and hand grips while holding the swords. That's before we move on to the beginning kata for this style. Meanwhile, we'll see if we can't at least get some practice bakens from the old farter elsewhere. By the time you graduate, you need to buy your own set of sabers that you're comfortable with. That's a long way off, but they will be expensive because of their rarity. Better to see if you can put aside some money each month from your monthly allowances for that starting now. Naruto let out a groan. Even with the stores forced to sell anything to him at regular prices, he wouldn't have much left over for savings. Would he even be able to buy anything decent? But that out of the way, let's go ahead and get you rested up. We'll get started on your weapon training tomorrow. Last thing, I wonder what we should call this style. The name was never given by this master. Kurama put a finger up to her muzzle in thought as she seemed to absent-mindedly swing some of her tails around behind her. Naruto watched the tails flicker around while thinking. He knew his tenants' tails were extremely deadly. They could destroy mountains, uproot entire sections of forests, and generate tsunamis. She could also practically slash anything into pieces with them, more like the style he was shown a few minutes ago. He raised his eyebrows as an idea struck him. How about thrashing tails? It keeps in theme with the raging fox and everything else you're teaching me. The blonde exclaimed excitedly. Kurama widened her eyes before grinning toothily. That's a good name. I don't think I'll be able to come up with anything better. Thrashing tails it is then, Naruto. Later at Naruto's apartment. Naruto was feeling despondent as he watched the sunlight begin to fade from his bedroom's window in the waning hours of this day. He was lying on his bed that he hadn't left all day since he woke up, even with his stomach rumbling for food. He'd be happy 364 days out of the year if he could help it, but not on this day. It was October 10th, the day of the Kyuubi disaster exactly 9 years ago, and also his birthday. It was also the day each year the village threw a festival for the Kyuubi's death, and the hatred rose exponentially for the blonde Jinchuriki for one night as the villagers bitterly remembered how much were lost on that fateful night. He couldn't go out without causing riots, so he decided to lock himself in on this day every year. Kurama gave him the day off from training because she knew his mind wouldn't be in the right frame for anything. She felt somewhat responsible for him hating this day, but there was nothing she could do or say to improve her container's mood. Naruto was going to be content with wasting away for the rest of the night, at least until he jolted into a sitting position upon hearing knocking at the front door. Timid and polite, he knew that kind of knock to be done by only one person. He let out a sigh, as he couldn't pretend to not be home, since it'd be impossible to hide from that person. He stood up from his bed, wearing just a t-shirt and shorts, and walked to the door to slowly open it. It revealed Hinata standing with 4 other people he wasn't expecting. A cute platinum blonde girl was standing in front of the others, waving with a mischievous smile. "Boy, Naruto. Witness my new technique Hijutsu. Happy birthday hug." Yamanaka Ino exclaimed playfully as she pounced on the surprised blonde for an enveloping hug, causing them to stumble to the floor. He inwardly blushed at such close contact with this girl, on whom he was beginning to realize he had a small crush. "Ani-chan. I know the same technique too. Mine's much more powerful, obviously." A cute little Yuga girl with long black hair piped up and then joined Ino by hopping on him and hugging his other side. "Hanabi-chan." Naruto exclaimed with half surprise and half happiness, seeing Hinata's younger sister here as well. "Troublesome, don't hurt our birthday boy, girls. I need him for our celebratory shogi match." Shikamaru warned with a smirk. "Hurry up and let us in so we can get started on the birthday cake Hinata-san baked for you." Choji insisted good-naturedly as he munched on his bag of chips. Hinata blushed upon having all attention on her now. "Sorry for coming by unannounced, but we wanted to celebrate your birthday." She spoke shyly with a gentle smile as she held up a large box, presumably holding the cake she baked. "It was her who convinced us come by. We're sorry for not doing this earlier, but we thought since you hated this day that you'd want to be left alone. We know now that's not what you need." Ino explained, making Hinata stammer for having her part in this revealed. "You're a troublesome one, but I speak for all of us that we're glad to have you as our friend. To show that, we must celebrate your day of birth that allowed you to be alive with us." Shikamaru added, before glancing away with some embarrassment when everyone stared at him for saying such profound words. Naruto was stunned. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't be upset with this intrusion on his self-imposed private day to wallow in self-pity. In fact, he was truly happy to know that people were truly thankful for his existence, and this was the first time anyone wanted to celebrate his birthday other than his surrogate grandfather. He allowed a true smile as he got up to his feet, then hugged Ino and Hanabi back tightly in thanks, making them giggle happily. "Thank you for doing this, Hinata-chan," he said gratefully to his indigo-haired friend, who was smiling happily. He then turned to the others. "Thank you as well, everyone. Come on in. Soon at the Shinobi Academy. So we're finally about to take the first step to becoming shinobi," Naruto announced out loud as he stood in front of the Shinobi Academy building. Hinata was standing next to him in her dark blue baggy pants, a black sleeveless spandex top covered by her fur-lined pink overcoat that went down to her thighs and was zipped up. Her indigo hair was showing signs of growing beyond her familiar short hairstyle, with it barely covering the back of her neck now. "Yes," she asserted with a cute determined expression while adorably clenching her fists. She was happy to be around Naruto nearly every day in the class. But there was an issue already, at least in her opinion. "Oh no, Naruto-kun, is there a reason you're wearing that?" She pointed out to Naruto's odd outfit. It looked like a full workman's jumpsuit 2 sizes too large for him, with very durable fabric and lots of useful pockets. She didn't have a problem with that. She was more perturbed by the color. Blindingly bright kill me now neon orange accented with blue from top to bottom, threatened to burn out her precious Byakugan if she was too close. Naruto smiled sheepishly. "This? Don't worry, Hinata-chan. I wouldn't be caught dead in this if I had a choice. I was shopping for an outfit when my sensei and I came across this in the bargains bin. I joked that I'd improve my stealth if I wore this doing pranks and got away scot-free. She got that idea and is making me wear this until I graduate." He grumbled. "Oh thank God, I mean I suppose that's a good challenge." Hinata did her best to hide her relief that her growing love interest did not suddenly have a horrible sense of fashion. Instead, she just had to put up with this for 4 years and hopefully be rewarded with seeing him in an outfit that complemented his good looks. She blushed lightly at the thought of what he could look like at that time with his body well into puberty by then. She wondered about herself, and one thing she was sure about was that she'd get a small chest like most women in her clan. She was quite certain about that, deciding to ignore that nudging sensation in the back of her head that seemed to imply she was going to be proven quite wrong. "It's kinda embarrassing, but I'll live with it. It's durable and big so I probably won't grow into it for a good while. It'll be fun telling Hokage that I avoided squads of Anbu and Jounin wearing this," Naruto asserted with a foxy grin that would make his tenant proud. Hinata giggled at her friend's antics as they stepped into the building. Arriving at their assigned classroom, which was set up with desks cascading down in rows from the back wall, they saw it was beginning to fill up. They immediately picked 2 free seats in the middle several rows up. They then found Choji and Shikamaru sitting all the way back in the rear corner, far away from everyone else. Naruto smirked, knowing that it was so that lazy Nara could get more sleep while being disturbed the least. They found Ino standing at the front of the room, as if she seemed to be waiting for something. She noticed them and waved happily before suddenly showing an affronted frown. Forgetting her post, she stomped up next to where her fellow blonde was sitting. "What the hell is that, Naruto?" The platinum blonde bellowed with disgust, pointing rudely at his questionable choice in wardrobe. Everyone that was present in the room looked at the sheepish orange-clad boy. Shikamaru was heard saying troublesome blondes. "It's a dare. I'm wearing this till I graduate," Naruto timidly said as he did his sheepish gesture, while some people in the classroom sniggered. "Why? You're pretty cute and you could get a lot of girls before you graduate if you dress cool," Ino retorted, slamming her hands on Naruto's desk as she leaned in close, making him blush slightly at this closeness and her compliment. Hinata perked up at Ino's words and displayed a flash of jealousy in her eyes at the notion of girls going after him. Ino didn't miss this and smirked slightly. "Why would I care about that, Ino-chan? I'm here to train to be a shinobi. Hell, you know I've already started on that long before I even set foot in this building." Naruto retorted with a serious expression, looking offended at the notion he was interested in anything other than shinobi training in this sacred building. Hinata had to hide her victorious smile. Not only was that horrid outfit going to scare away image-conscious girls, he also wasn't going to be easily swayed into looking for any girl's affection. If everything went right, he'd be left all to her when the time for romance came. "Well, the way you said that is pretty cool. Maybe that crappy outfit won't repel girls so much if you're still going to be cool about anything else," Ino retorted with a smirk, feeling a little warm inwardly upon seeing Naruto's serious gaze. She was also enjoying the slightly panicked look in Hinata's eyes, as both girls noted several other girls in the classroom, blushing at Naruto's serious but very handsome expression, despite his awful orange outfit. Before Naruto could reply, the entire room went silent. Ino perked up and turned away from her fellow blonde to see what was going on. All three friends found the source at the classroom's door. A raven-haired boy with onyx black eyes stood there, his eyes carefully surveying the entire room. He displayed a disinterested and arrogant expression, as if he couldn't be bothered with anything that wasn't relevant to him. He was wearing a short-sleeved and high-collared black zip-up shirt with white shorts. His hair was styled to look like a duck's butt. If one were to look at the back of his shirt, it would display his clan symbol, denoting that he was an Uchiha. "Is that Uchiha Sasuke?" one girl said in a trembling voice. Ino let out a squeal as she and many other girls scrambled over to near Sasuke and asked him many questions. Hiding the slight pang in his chest at seeing his slight crush fawn over someone else, he amused himself with watching one of Sasuke's eyes twitch constantly at this smothering attention. He glanced over to his left to see Hinata sitting there, looking on with disinterest. "Not gonna go for duck but like everyone else," he whispered near her ear, which nearly made her jump. After taking a second to think over what he said to her, she turned to him with a look of annoyance. Naruto was surprised to see that since it was rare for her to get cross with him. Hinata was a little angry with Naruto. She already matured quickly under the harsh environment within her clan. So much that she already developed a more advanced view on many subjects, including romance. While they were still too young to worry about that subject seriously, he was going to be her future love interest when they grew older, that much she knew about herself. For her love interest to suggest that she went after someone else, even if it was a joke, upset her greatly. "I have absolutely no interest in the Uchiha," she replied with such cold indifference Naruto had to check if he was covered in frost at that moment. It was as if she perfected the Yuga composure. "I think I might have pissed her off somehow. I'd say even that sent a shiver down my spine. Sorry, Hinata-chan. I was just teasing." Hinata sighed and glanced away outside the window as the rest of the girls in the classroom continued to crowd around Sasuke while he tried to push his way through to his seat. Naruto silently cursed his stupidity and thought about what to say to his friend before a loud and high-pitched screech filled the classroom. "Ino pig. Get away from Sasuke-kun. You're bothering him." "Arg." A loud pained yell snapped the entire classroom from whatever they were doing to look toward the source. Naruto was tightly pressing his hands over his ears while Hinata was fussing over him, concerned for his pain. "What the hell that all about?" A pink-haired girl near Sasuke, who was also covering his ears, yelled at the interruption, not dropping her volume at all. "For stupid sake. Be quiet." Naruto cried as he slammed his forehead onto the desk, followed by a jolt and a yelp from Hinata as she was a little distressed over his discomfort. It was at this point that he discovered that both he and Kurama were quite sensitive to high-pitched noises. The great fox was now roaring in pain and rolling all over in his mindscape with hands clamped tightly over her ears as well. "What the hell? I can't be that loud." The banshee kept the volume up as she looked around the classroom and saw several people covering their ears. Embarrassed, her mouth flapped like a fish before Ino's hand slapped over it. Forehead shut up. You're hurting Naruto with his sensitive hearing. The blonde hissed harshly to her friend rival. She might have been competing for Sasuke, but she wasn't going to let anyone hurt her best friend, even if it was unintentional. That finally seemed to shut Haruno Sakura up for the moment, much to the relief of everyone in the room, Naruto especially. Recovering, he scowled menacingly at the pink-haired girl, who recoiled under his icy glare. Kurama was now ranting in his head about exterminating all pink-haired humans in existence. He was sorely tempted to take that suggestion for a moment. "Ah no, are you okay, Naruto-kun?" Hinata inquired of the blonde, her annoyance from earlier completely forgotten. "I'll barely live," he grumbled as his mood took a temporary dive from his failed joke in the Banshee. They remained silent as more people filed into the classroom. A young female chunin stepped into the room and the entire room went silent. The instructor greeted and welcomed everyone with a long speech on this being the first step to becoming a shinobi of Konohagakure. As this was going on, Naruto gazed silently at Sasuke sitting in the next row down by the windows. He seems a little arrogant. Like I said in the past, he looks like he's focused on only one goal, which I assume to be avenging the loss of his clan. You see all those people throwing themselves at his feet with hope of becoming his friend, yet he doesn't care about that. I bet he got the civilian council backing his every move, yet he's just using them so he can get stronger any way possible until they ran out of options. He'd then betray them to look for more power. The blonde scowled. So he's likely getting advanced training. I suppose I'm lucky I have a powerful entity for a sensei. Not just a powerful entity, I am the almighty Kyuubi no Kitsune. Bow before me, puny mortals. Kurama retorted with mock haughtiness. Naruto had to hold in a snort of laughter. Anyway, you should keep your true talents hidden. Don't use anything you've learned already until the lessons covering them come up. You're also forbidden from using Raging Fox in any taijutsu spar on the school grounds. It will hurt the students too much and you'll garner too much attention with that. You will learn the academy style instead to fool them. In fact, you probably should think about keeping a low profile throughout the years. Stay middle of the ground in grades. I don't mind that. I don't need the attention that they're probably going to pile on that duckbit to inflate his ego until it got too big to fit through the village's gates. Any particular reason why, though? Take a look at the instructor. Naruto shifted his eyes to look directly at the speaking chunin. He narrowed his eyes upon noting the familiar expression of loathing and disgust on her face each time she glanced up at the blonde Jinchuriki. They're going to find every reason that I'm you personified. I suppose being too smart or too advanced in skills will set them off and they'll try to sabotage me at every turn. Right. I honestly don't care if my container do not come out top in this pathetic academy. If it was 50 years ago when the standards for graduating were much higher, I probably would have cared a tiny bit. Naruto smirked. It's nice having a doting parent in my head. I doubt a parent would have you risk falling down a deep ravine on a regular basis, plan to have you go into a forest full of vicious monsters for training, teach you techniques that has the power to change the landscape for miles around, or especially have you dress up in that orange abomination for the next 4 years. Love you too, Foxy. He nearly chuckled aloud upon hearing a snort from his friend. 1 month later at the academy. Okay. It's time for our first exam. Don't turn your test over until I've finished passing them out, okay? The female instructor ordered as she moved around the classroom handing out papers. She shot a particularly nasty glare at Naruto as she handed him his copy. He gave an uncaring shrug. Stapling 5 pairs of her rather racy panties, which he snatched from her home, to the classroom ceiling in full view of everyone a couple weeks ago, likely didn't endear him to her. Hinata seemed rather put out for a few days as well. You should only touch me, I mean, you shouldn't touch any woman's underwear without permission. Were her words as she blushed a brilliant shade of red that day. When the instructor gave the word to begin, he flipped the paper over. He narrowed his eyes immediately. He might have found the lectures boring, but he paid enough attention to know that his dear sensei didn't cover anything related to this exam's questions. In addition, they were much harder than what a first-year student was supposed to be studying. He still could answer all the questions easily though. Just as he was contemplating this issue, a growl came from inside his head. So they're going to try to sabotage my container anyway. Even if you answered them all correctly, they'd think you're me in human disguise. After all, there is no way dumb old Naruto could be this smart. Boy, I think I was just insulted. Whatever do you mean? She replied quickly in a far too innocent tone. He just decided to ignore this. I guess she's still a little pissed about the panties incident. Let's see, I'm sure this is a genjutsu. Why would she stupidly give me any evidence that I can take to Hokage to get her in trouble? There is no genjutsu. She replied in a perfect deadpan tone that broadcast exactly what she thought of the instructor's intelligence level. Naruto's eyes bulged out. What the hell? Is she really that stupid? He leveled a gaze with the Chunin at the front of the room and smirked evilly. She involuntarily shivered. Think I should pretend to have no clue and answer them wrong? You did want me to keep a low profile. No. I want you to keep a low profile, not be deemed dumb enough to not notice an obvious switcheroo. If you let this go by, they will keep doing this and it'll get annoying. Make an example of her so other instructors won't try the same thing. Excuse me, sensei. I believe you gave me the wrong copy. These questions have never been covered in your lectures, Naruto innocently said, and everyone in the class perked their heads up, interested in the development. The instructor looked offended, but inwardly she was sweating. It's not my fault you didn't pay attention to my lectures. Now complete the exam quietly or I will have you leave for disrupting the test. Naruto allowed a cold smile to slowly form that chilled her. She was now feeling like she just blew her chance to back out. If you're so sure this is the correct exam, I'm taking this to the headmaster of this school, who happens to be Hokage-sama, and have him explain to me why I was given a much more difficult test than the rest of the class without any prior warning, Naruto declared with his icy cold eyes, seemingly piercing through the profusely sweating instructor. He merely stood with the paper in hand and stepped out of the classroom toward the Hokage's office. The entire room broke into murmurs while Hinata, Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji were glaring angrily at the instructor. She sank down to her knees in defeat as she briefly thought that perhaps she let her hatred for the Kyuubi consume her, and now she was going to pay dearly. The next day, a new instructor came into the classroom. He flinched under Naruto's steely gaze as he remembered the Hokage's promise of pain if he did not do his job properly. He didn't doubt that after he heard the previous instructor was permanently busted back down to Genin. 2 months later at the academy. It was a beautiful spring day in May as all the first-year students mingled outside on the sparring grounds next to the academy building. They were enjoying their lunch break between learning the academy style and sparring with it after the meal. It was going to be the students' first time sparring with their partners. So what are you going to do, Naruto? Shikamaru mumbled as he made a move on the improvised shogi board drawn in the dirt between him and Naruto. They were playing a quick shogi match before the instructor would come out to end the break. Hinata was sitting next to Naruto as she watched the match in fascination, while Ino and Choji were making small talks behind the pineapple-haired boy. Huh? I'm fortifying my Mino Castle defense against your offensive, was the other player's reply as he moved one of his pieces to block his opponent's advance. Naruto had improved tremendously in his shogi playing. He actually won his first match against Shikamaru a few months ago, much to the Nara's dismay. Now he usually won 3 out of 10 times at this point, while consistently challenging Shikamaru's planning capacity each match. Troublesome, I meant the spars. We know you're working on that style of yours. We've never actually seen it in action. Are you going to use it? The lazy genius drawled with feigned disinterest as he made another sneaky move on the board, much to his opponent's chagrin. To be honest, Shikamaru really wanted to see how strong Naruto truly was. He knew the blonde was well beyond everyone, even Sasuke, in this class. With the way he carried himself lately, he might be a lazy ass, and he'd find it troublesome to tell anyone otherwise, but he rather disliked not having all the data on anything that interested him. Sorry Shika. I'd rather not. Naruto replied apologetically as he made a sneaky move of his own. Shikamaru's eye twitched before he went into his now too common thinking pose. Oh no, why not? I have seen you practice with it and you are very far along with it. I am confident you can beat anyone here. Hinata interjected sly. Including you? Naruto retorted cheekily. The Yuga blushed but gave him a mock glare with puffed cheeks. Chuckling at his friend's cute reaction, he waved it off. Nah. I don't need the attention and it'll seriously hurt anyone here if I go too far. Also. Sasuke team will be on my ass 24/7 to fight him if I show off too much. I'll just stick with the academy style and see how far I can get with that. Hinata nodded, a little dejected that she won't get to see her friend kick some ass. She was brought out of her thoughts upon hearing Shikamaru's sharp exhalation as he came out of his thinking pose. Damn it, troublesome. You win. I can't think of any move from this point that will get me out of trouble. Naruto punched his arm into the air in victory. Yada. My record's 23 wins and 126 losses now. Everyone but Shikamaru sweat dropped at their friend's delight over such a lopsided win-loss record. I doubt anyone will find that impressive, Ino said dully from behind Shikamaru, happy to be done waiting for the boys to finish that boring game. Well, imagine this. If it was against someone like that in Inuzuka, it'd really suck so badly. I'd think something's wrong with my head for losing to him so much. Naruto teased, getting a light swat on the back of his head from Hinata. Be nice, Naruto-kun. But if it was against a genius like Shika here, it's impressive. Tell me, did any of you win even once against him? Naruto finished, barely noticing the swat. Choji, Ino, and Hinata flinched and slumped to their fours with rain clouds hanging over their heads. Troublesome, do you have to be so brutal? Shikamaru grumbled as he let out a yawn. Naruto just shot him a foxy smirk. Oh, lunch break's over. Time for the sparring matches. The instructor yelled as he stepped out of the building toward a large circle of bricks buried into the ground. Everyone gathered around the sparring ring at this point, and the instructor started things off with picking 2 random students to go up against each other for one 3-minute round each pair. It went on for a while with Hinata, Choji, Sasuke, Ino, and Shikamaru winning their matches rather easily. Finally it was Naruto's turn up against the same Inyazuka he spoke of earlier. This brown-haired boy was wearing a simple shirt and shorts with the red Inyazuka clan fangs tattooed on his cheeks. He was just introduced to his companion dog, Akamaru, and they haven't trained together enough to be able to fight alongside each other effectively yet. Due to that, the tiny Akamaru stayed on the sideline. Yeah. Looks like I got an easy one. Inyazuka Kiba exclaimed loudly as he stepped up across from the waiting Naruto. Still as smelly as ever, dog breath. The blonde retorted as he pinched his nose. He really did smell strongly of wet dogs. Kiba immediately growled at the insult. The instructor shouted start. Just as Kiba leaped toward Naruto, his sharp canines bared in a snarl. Naruto simply sidestepped the lunge and countered with a basic palm strike at the Inyazuka's exposed side. Kiba let a pained gasp escape from his lips as he blindly swung his hand back around, its sharpened fingernails aimed at Naruto's head. The blonde effortlessly grabbed the hand and pulled the Inyazuka backward across to flip him over and onto the ground with a loud thud. Kiba grunted painfully as he landed hard on his back. Damn you. He cursed as he recovered and shot to his feet, only to have a foot already meeting his chest as soon as he stood up. He was sent flying back from the unexpected thrust kick out of the ring and then tumbled to a stop. Naruto was already moving toward the dazed Inyazuka when he was stopped. Akamaru had moved in between him and his partner, barking and growling protectively. The surprised instructor decided to stop the spar at that point and unenthusiastically awarded Naruto the win. Kiba slowly sat up grumbling about his luck but was surprised when he saw an offered hand in front of him. He glanced up to find Naruto standing over him with a friendly smile. No hard feelings, I hope, he said easily. Kiba eyed him with suspicion for a moment before sighing and took the offered hand to get to his feet. I still want to kick your ass, he retorted with a challenging smile. Naruto laughed freely. I'll be looking forward to more matches with you then, dog breath. He shot back before walking off with a wave over his shoulder. His friends joined him since that was the last spar for the day and the class was over now. The students who watched were impressed while Sasuke eyed Naruto suspiciously. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow as he walked alongside the smiling blonde. That was a very sharp and precise use of the standard kata. It shows how much he trained on his actual style if he was able to use the standard style so easily already. He thought, filling in more blanks about the mystery that was Uzumaki Naruto. Next month in Hokage's office, one day before. Naruto leaves for his first training trip. The third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, the most powerful shinobi in the village, also known as the Kami of Shinobi, was rubbing his temples and sighing heavily as an enraged Anbu stood in front of the desk, ranting about a certain someone's latest prank. Uzumaki Naruto was sitting on the floor next to the ranting Anbu and he was tied up tightly with rope. He had on a shit-eating grin. He broke into our locker room and switched out some of our uniforms and masks. Considering the fact that the HQ is actually supposed to be hidden, this is a serious breach of security. We have to do something about this damn brat. Boy. That was supposed to be a secret. Every villager knew it out by watching where the Anbu hang around certain buildings. At least put a damn genjutsu up or something. Naruto retorted loudly at the very animated Anbu. Hiruzen sighed heavily again. What happened with the uniforms and masks, Naruto-kun? I do not see anything different. He tiredly said as he indicated the normal-looking Anbu next to the boy. He almost regretted his question as he watched Naruto's grin grow sinister. He easily felt his 3 hidden Anbu guards in the office shifting uncomfortably. I only picked 3 to victimize, I mean have fun with. You probably can guess who. His surrogate grandson replied ominously. It only took the old man a second to understand his implications. He snapped his fingers. No one appeared from the shadows in this room. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow and displayed a too neutral smile that made everyone shiver. Now I am willing to give all 3 of you one more chance. If any one of you do not come out now, I will bust all of you back down to Genin and doing only Tora missions for a year. Is that clear? Naruto snickered as the third easily felt the fear and shame radiating off his hidden guards. He took a moment before snapping his fingers again. All 3 hidden guards appeared behind the tied-up Naruto at the same time. The third winced as he raised a hand to block the blindingly bright colors radiating off the Anbu's new uniforms. The one on the left was wearing a bright neon yellow Anbu uniform with a generic white mask that had a cartoonish scribbling of a Hinohinamaheji on it. The one in the center was all neon pink, and his generic mask scribbling showed a perverted expression, a lecherous leer, peering eyes, and rosy cheeks. The last one on the right wore neon green. Her mask showed a scribbling of an awesome face. It took the Hokage all he had to suppress his laughter at the ridiculous display in front of him. Naruto didn't have the same reservation as he laughed uproariously at the sight of the three Anbu wearing nothing but eye-searing colors. Even the agent who caught the boy had to work to hold his laughter back. Our apologies, Hokage-sama. As you can see, it was difficult for us to come out here. The one in the center spoke quietly as he glared daggers at the laughing blonde. We weren't able to find any spare. The third inquired as he did everything to keep his composure on the inside. There weren't anything else in the locker room we could use, and we could not afford to miss our shift, so we were forced to use what we had. The neon green female Anbu with long purple hair spoke up. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at Naruto for an explanation. No worries, Hokage-jiji. I hid the stuff I switched out inside the storage room next door to the locker room. They'll find everything there. The Anbu let out a sigh of relief. Very well. I'll take care of Naruto-kun. You may go back to work. The third spoke dismissively. The three neon-colored Anbu prepared to leave the office to change, while the normal-looking Anbu already vanished into thin air. Where are you going? I didn't say you could leave your posts. Remain like that for the rest of the day. In fact, don't even change until after you have gotten home from your shift. The Hokage ordered with a pleasant smile. The three Anbu flinched in horror. That's cold, old man. Naruto observed with an amused grin. The old man raised a finger to point at him. If they weren't able to detect you breaking into a building buzzing with the best trained nin stationed every 20 feet in that bright orange outfit, then either they need to be trained some more or you deserve an award. Maybe they'll learn from your example briefly, Naruto-kun. He smirked as he watched his guards glare and project their killing intent at the tied-up boy, who was getting nervous. Boy, there's no need to piss off people who can hide in shadows and stab things with pointy things. They're going to come for me in the middle of the night. The neon green Anbu's hand twitched slightly, as if she was about to reach for her sword. I am sure they won't, especially after they hear what I have thought up for your punishment. I was thinking about having one of my former students join you on this training trip alongside Tenzo-san, who I have explained as having the unique ability to subdue any Bijuu's chakra if it gets out of control. However, I honestly do not think he will be needed until the next break, and I could not find him in time anyway, so I will be replacing him with a certain someone. He's a Taijutsu specialist who would be able to help you improve your Taijutsu when you're taking breaks from bringing out the Kyuubi's chakra. The Hokage spoke neutrally, working to keep a full-blown dastardly smirk from forming on his face. The three Anbu's demeanor changed completely at the mention of the Taijutsu specialist, and they were grinning evilly behind their masks. Naruto seemed to think nothing was wrong though. The Taijutsu specialist, huh? I don't see how that'd be punishment. He bowed his head. You will find out, young boy, when you meet your two guardians tomorrow at the main gate. The third replied with a pleasant smile. Later that night, one Mitarashi Anko almost had to be admitted into the hospital after she hurt her stomach and facial muscles, laughing so hard at her roommate's bright neon green uniform and mask. Next morning at the Hokage's office. Sarutobi Hiruzen yawned loudly as he shook the tiredness out of his old body, walking into the office to start his work for the day. Before sitting at the desk, he opened the window facing the village's main gate in the distance and sat down. He only had to wait a few minutes before a man's ear-splitting voice shook the quiet morning air. Yosh. Your flame of youth is burning so brightly if you are training at such a young age. We shall train together as hard as we can for the next 3 months and make your youthfulness burn white hot. Followed by a child's horrified yell. Arg. Don't let the caterpillars on your eyes near me. Damn you, old man. Hiruzen leaned back into his chair and let a smile grow slowly on his face. Music to my ear. 3 months later. Tenzo, a brown-haired Anbu with a somewhat plain-looking face framed by a silver hapuri, was standing in front of the Hokage's desk in the office, giving his report. Naruto-san trained himself nearly into the ground every day over the past 3 months. After spending half of each day trying to control the Kyuubi's chakra, he spent the other half practicing what he learned from the Kyuubi overnight and getting into Taijutsu spars with me and Gai-san. He never won, but we have seen vast improvements compared to when he left with us 3 months ago. The Hokage nodded his head, indicating for Tenzo to continue. In the final spar against Gai-san before we left, we allowed Naruto-san to augment his new Taijutsu style with the Kyuubi's power. I carefully monitored the battle so I could interfere with my ceiling at any time if need be. The difference was incredible. It actually ended up with Gai-san getting several minor injuries before Naruto-san was knocked out. I still did not go all out, but for a 9-year-old boy to able to give an elite jounin like the green beast of Konoha little trouble for 30 minutes is nothing short of amazing. The third raised an eyebrow. How much of the Kyuubi's power is he able to control? He is able to go up to 2 tails of the Kyuubi's chakra in a red shroud that completely surrounds his body and it's shaped to look like a fox. In that mode, he was as fast as a high chunin. If all he focused on was running, his strength increased exponentially, he recovers from most minor injuries almost instantly, and the shroud defends him against low-level jutsu. He is also able to mold the chakra shroud into forming claws that can extend from his body to reach long-distance targets. All of this was able to go up to 30 minutes of usage in which he was completely stable with no risk of losing control. After that, the malevolent chakra will begin to hurt his body, so we restricted him to only 30 minutes of the chakra's usage per day. From what I documented of Naruto-san's progress, he managed to control 4 levels of the demon fox's power. Didn't you say 2 tails worth of chakra? There is also a tailless mode in which we did not see the red chakra surrounding him, but he still released the Kyuubi's killing intent and gained a significant speed and strength boost over his normal attributes. Not to mention at that level and higher, he displayed more defined Kyuubi-like features like red eyes with slitted pupils, extended canines, larger and darker whiskers, and sharp claw-like fingernails. Below that level, he is able to channel a small bit of the chakra to his eyes for improved vision, especially at nighttime, where he could see everything as if it was daytime, and he can also use the chakra to extend his fingernails into claws or retract them. The chakra used for these functions was completely undetectable, so he is able to use his eyes or claws anytime he wishes to without worrying anyone around him with the Kyuubi's presence. The third leaned back into his chair, wondering if he was letting Naruto go too far with the training too fast. Tenzo-san, was there any doubt even a tiny amount from either you or Guy-san that Naruto remained completely himself? Tenzo shook his head with a smile. After spending 3 months with him, I can say with 100% confidence he is still the Uzumaki Naruto you know. In fact, he's planning a PR. He was interrupted by the office's door banging loudly open to reveal a horror unlike anything the third had seen in his long life. Naruto walked into the room. That was normal enough itself, but everything ended after that. He was sporting a horrid green one-piece spandex with an orange sash around his waist and orange leg warmers. His blonde hair was cut and smoothed into a bowl cut style like Mito Guy, and he even sported 2 very thick and fuzzy blonde eyebrows above his blue eyes. To make it worse, he opened his mouth. Yosh. I have returned from 3 months of making my flames of youth burn white hot. I have never felt more youthful than I am right now. The Hokage sat stock still in his chair with a dumb expression on his face, as if he was trying his best to unsee what had been wrought before him. He did not see Tenzo slap his forehead. Your youthfulness burns brightly compared to mine. I shall train myself as hard as I can until my youthfulness can match your white-hot youth. Mito Guy's voice boomed throughout the office as a tall black-haired man in the same green spandex, with a jounin vest worn over it, and light green legwarmers ran into the room to stand next to Naruto. He also sported the same horrid bowl cut and thick black eyebrows. Naruto turned to Guy. Guy-sensei. I shall make my youthfulness burn even more brightly if you do that. If I cannot do it, I'll run 10 laps around the land of fire. Naruto-san. Your youth will burn even more with that. If I cannot succeed in matching your youthfulness, I shall run 10 laps around the entire elemental nations. The entire office went deathly silent for a moment until a thump was heard. Everyone looked toward the desk to see the third laying his forehead on it, whispering something no one could make out. It's my fault I was too harsh on Naruto-kun before he left and now he's turned into a mini guy. What horrors have I wrought? I'm so sorry, Minato-kun. I shall redeem myself by ending their lives, then commit seppuku. An uproarious laughter erupted throughout the office, causing him to raise his head. He saw Guy and Naruto on their backs laughing. We sure got you, old man. Guy exclaimed before laughing some more with the Naruto-Guy hybrid. His eye twitched. What is going on? Is this a prank and why have you joined in, Guy-san? I'm not him. The Guy impostor replied as he got up before puffing into some smoke. After a second, the smoke cleared away to reveal a regular-looking Naruto in his orange jumpsuit. I forgot to mention, Naruto-san here has learned Kage Bunshin no Jutsu from the Kyuubi, and he can use it in combination with Henge with frightening ease. Tenzo suddenly interjected before there was any further confusion. As if on cue, the Guy-Naruto hybrid released its Henge to reveal another normal-looking Naruto. The cold chill went deep into the very essence of the third's being as he realized the implications of multiple solid copies of Naruto each, with his intelligence and mischievousness. Terrified of that notion, he quickly pushed it aside and made a mental note to hurry up and pick his replacement as soon as possible. including the 3 guards hidden inside the office, the entire Anbu force, even the ones out of the village on missions, got an ice cold chill down their spines as they had the feeling their greatest nemesis ever suddenly got much more powerful. "Which one of you is the original?" the Hokage erratically asked as he wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. The one that was Guy raised his hand to show his fingernails sharpening into claws. He then stabbed them lightly into the other Naruto to pop it. "I'm back, Hokage Jiji," the blonde exclaimed with a foxy grin. The Hokage returned the grin with an uncertain smile. "I am glad to see you are doing well. Tenzo-san here was telling me how much of a menak, I mean how much of a good shinobi you will grow into. I can't believe how much stronger I got. It's thanks to Guy-sensei and Tenzo-sensei here that I came this far. I actually almost became a mini guy a few times though." Everyone in the office, including the hidden Anbu, shuddered. It's like he has some way of brainwashing people. I hope no one else will fall for his enthusiasm. Everyone shuddered again. Ahem, that won't happen hopefully. "So you are able to use the Cage Bunch, and how many copies are you able to create, Naruto-kun?" the Hokage inquired. "I was able to go up to 200, but they're pathetically weak with so little chakra and they won't last long. I can make 25 clones that last all day and they have about the same strength as me. Though they still pop after one hit." "Very good. I dare say you are already ready to graduate with what you have learned. You're welcome to test out early if you'd like." The old man was not surprised to see his surrogate grandson shake his head no without any hesitation. "No thanks, Hokage Jiji. The fox says I'm still not ready and I'd rather enjoy my time with my friends before we all have to do missions and stuff. For the next year, I'm just going to focus on learning more about elemental jutsu and figure out my nature affinities." Fox also said I'd likely have a natural affinity for fire due to her chakra, but she believes there will be 1 or 2 more. The Hokage nodded his head. "I'm glad you made it back here safely. I'll let you go home, as I'm sure you'd like to rest before the academy starts again in 2 days. Before you go though, I would like to inquire of you and Tenzo-san on the whereabouts of Guy-san. He usually is the first one here upon returning from any mission," expressing his enthusiasm. Tenzo let out an exasperated sigh. Naruto struck his usual sheepish pose. "That'd be my fault, Hokage Jiji." The old man raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting an explanation. "I got tired of his youthfulness on the return trip, so I challenged him to keep quiet the rest of the way or he'd run 5 laps around the land of fire. Needless to say, he failed miserably. Before we could tell him it was a joke, he took off with inhuman speed and we never found him. He's probably scaring the Kumo patrols shitless running along the lightning border at this moment." The god of shinobi thumped his forehead on the desk while the hidden Anbu could not help but chuckle at the comedy they were watching. On the streets heading toward the Yuga compound. "Man, I really miss the glares of hatred from these lovely villagers," Naruto thought sarcastically as he walked through the village surrounded by glaring people. He heard whispers of the demons back from wherever he disappeared to. "I was hoping he'd stay away," and more. Kurama spoke up. "Oh well. Nothing we can do about that. Listen, Naruto, I never had a chance to say this, but I want you to know I am proud and astonished at how quickly you have learned to control my chakra. I never would have expected you to get up to 2 tails in just 3 months. Not to mention you are doing well with your taijutsu and kinjutsu training." "Thanks, Kurama. It means a lot to me to hear you say that. Unfortunately, I'm afraid we will hit a brick wall next break. You will obtain 3 tails with no problem, but 4th and beyond is when it's going to be tough. At the 4th tail and above you will gain more of the powerful abilities I use, like the Bijuadama. However, the chakra shroud will become so malevolent and dense that it'll hurt your body right away and you will find it almost impossible to keep control of your senses. If you go on a rampage, almost no one will be able to stop you, not even that wood ghoul." Naruto frowned at that. "That sucks. I guess we'll have to make do with mastering 3 tails to the best of our abilities and leave it at that until we figure out something in the future. I'm not saying we give up on this. There are options we can try next summer to see if they'll work. And what if they fail? What'll happen? Pain. Extreme and all-encompassing pain. So much pain that you'll wish you were dead," Kurama replied with no hesitation. "Geez, no need to sugarcoat it. Tell me how bad it really will be," Naruto retorted with sarcasm while his tenants snickered. "I never said it'd be easy. If what that old fart said about his student coming along to help you next year is true, it should help you in your progress. You know of him?" "Yes. His name is Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin." Naruto raised both his eyebrows. "Seriously, I read about him in the history books. He's supposed to be very strong." "That's not all. You're more related to him than you realize." "Huh? He's also supposed to be your godfather. I heard your parents appoint him as one when I was sealed in your mother." Naruto stopped all of a sudden in the middle of the street, surprising several villagers nearby. He stood there for a minute as he slowly took in the revelation as some of the villagers looked on with curiosity. He started walking again, with a cold frown and his fists clenched tightly at his sides as he continued on his way to the Yuga compound. When I meet him, I am going to kick that son of a bitch in the balls first thing. Kurama snickered at that possibility. A few minutes later, his anger dissipated. He decided it wasn't worth fuming over the latest revelation if Urei wasn't going to be around to take his well-deserved punishment. He arrived at the gate of the Yuga compound. The guards quickly allowed him inside, used to his frequent presence by now. Naruto made his way toward the main family's house. He wondered how Hinata, Hanabi, and Hiashi were doing after 3 months. He remembered that Hinata became distressed when he told her that he would be out of the village. Hanabi's reaction was more extreme as she refused to let him go for nearly all day on the day before his departure. They all but ordered him to stop by the compound as soon as he returned. He smiled at the memory of Hanabi threatening him with bodily harm if he upset Hinata by not making a beeline for the compound from the Hokage's office as soon as possible. He knew the younger Yuga would be just as upset herself, if more. He frowned as he felt someone's cold fury directed at him. He shifted his eyes to the right to find the source. Yuga Niji stepped out of the shadow under a tree near the main house's entrance. The blonde stopped in his track, his hands still at his sides as he glared directly at a pair of cold wide eyes. They saw each other several times in passing, but they haven't directly faced each other since Niji's brutal attack a year and a half ago. Is there something you need, Niji-san? Naruto said coolly as he kept his icy gaze leveled with Niji's. You look much stronger compared to the weakling I faced last time, Uzumaki-sama. How is that possible? Niji's tone was just as cold and calculating as his eyes. Training and hard work, that's all. I feel like I could kick your ass right now. Too bad Hiashi-sama banned us from dueling. Naruto retorted with a nonchalant shrug. Niji smirked. I am not concerned about you catching up to me. Fate has decided I am the stronger of us and I will defeat you when we do have our battle. Yeah, I don't believe in all that fate crap and I'll prove that by taking in all your anger and returning it tenfold. Be ready because I'm constantly getting stronger. Can you afford to rely on your fate bailing you out when you find out you never really worked hard enough to back up your talk? Niji narrowed his eyes with a silent snarl while Naruto smirked darkly as he broke off the conversation and continued his walk toward Hiashi's house. The Yuga prodigy clenched his fists as he stormed off toward his residence. I will do everything I can to prove him otherwise. I will make myself stronger and faster for I am fated to win. A moment later, his confrontation with Niji forgotten, Naruto stood at the front door to Hiashi's house. He knocked once before he heard some thumping and rumbling, and it was getting louder. He sweat dropped for an instant before the front door flew open to launch a tiny Yuga girl into the blonde's stomach. He could only expel air from his lungs involuntarily as he caught the black-haired cannonball. Ani-chan. You're back. Did you come here straight from Hokage-sama's office like I told you to? Hanabi excitedly yapped as she wrapped her arms around his waist for a tight hug. Naruto chuckled and patted her back. I did, little firecracker. Looks like you're very happy I followed your orders. He teased after catching his breath. That was for Ni-chan's sake. I could wait until tomorrow, but she would be heartbroken if she heard you waited. Hanabi defended with a blush as she let go of his waist. I would have been fine, Hanabi-chan. He might have needed his rest upon returning from the trip, you know. Hinata admonished her little sister softly as she appeared at the doorway, but it was clear she was happy to see her friend as soon as possible too. Her attire hadn't changed much, but her hair had grown longer as it now reached her shoulders. Naruto had to admit she was looking cuter the longer her hair grew. Uzumaki-san, it is good to see you again after so long. Please come in. Hiashi appeared behind Hinata and gave a bow. Naruto returned the bow as he and Hanabi went inside with the rest. A few minutes later, they were seated at the dining table enjoying some tempura and stir-fried vegetables cooked by Hinata. The children were chatting about what they did over the past 3 months. And I was able to pull a fast one on Guy-sensei when he thought he hit me, but it was really a shadow clone that I substituted with. Naruto was recounting his stories, carefully leaving out any mention of Kurama and her chakra. I know what is a shadow clone. Hinata spoke up softly and Hanabi looked just as curious. Hiashi raised an eyebrow at the notion of a child learning a Jounin-level Kinjutsu. Naruto looked toward the clan head as if to silently ask permission. He got a nod. It's a jutsu I learned from my sensei. Not many can use this because of the high chakra requirement, but I have plenty to spare. Naruto explained as he formed a cross shape with his hands and 2 fingers each. A puff of smoke appeared next to him, surprising both Hinata and Hanabi. The smoke cleared to reveal a perfect clone of Naruto waving at the girls. The girls looked shocked and could only dumbly wave back. Hiashi smirked a little. Is that a solid copy? Hinata squeaked as her Byakugan activated to check. That's right, Hinata-chan. I can do the same attacks as boss if I was given enough chakra, and I can also think independently from him if I don't have an order to carry out. The clone spoke up. I also can learn whatever it learns when it dispels. Perfect for training, spying, reading, etc. The only thing that can't be transferred back to me is muscle training. I will have to do that myself. A major disadvantage is that the clone pops after one hit. The original explained as he demonstrated by lightly tapping the clone on its head to make it disappear in a puff of smoke. If I use a lot of chakra, the clone can last longer and might be able to take a couple more hits before dispelling. Hinata sat still as the implications of multiple Narutos running around went through her mind. Unlike the perturbed reactions from the Hokage and Anbu, it made her happy. So happy she promptly fainted and fell backward onto the floor from her kneeling position at the table with a silly grin plastered on her face. Hinata-chan ni-chan. Naruto and Hanabi cried alarmingly as they moved around to hover over Hinata's form. Hiashi almost facepalmed as he seemed to have understood exactly what went through his daughter's mind. She's starting out so young, like my beloved Hitomi. Uzumaki-san, it seems I will fear for your innocence sooner rather than later. An hour later, our blonde hero was found sitting on the living room sofa next to Hiashi reading a scroll in his chair. His right eye was twitching with annoyance. The reasons for this were found in an indigo-haired girl sleeping with her head on his lap, her arms tightly wrapped round his right thigh, and her younger black-haired sister resting her head against his left shoulder, with both of her arms wrapped tightly around his left arm. Both of them cuddled up tightly against him, as if refusing to let him have a chance to slip out. "What's with Yuga girls using me as their personal teddy bear?" Naruto grumbled. Hiashi glanced up from the scroll with a small smirk. "Perhaps it is part of your charm, Uzumaki-san. Even your servant looked at me as if I'm her favorite stuffed animal." Hiashi raised an eyebrow. "Amo-san is 38 years old." "Exactly. Not just these girls, but other Yuga females of all ages too. A while ago, I even saw one of the elders do a double take in my direction with that lovely dovey look in her eyes. That must have been my aunt. She is rather odd. My apologies." Naruto gave a slight shudder. Hiashi shook his head slightly with an amused smirk. A comfortable silence followed, with the two girls' gentle breathing the only noise being made in the living room. Naruto's expression turned somewhat melancholy, as he seemed to be stuck on a subject in his mind. "Hiashi-sama, are you really okay with your daughters being friends with me? The village pariah and the Jinchuriki?" Hiashi raised his head. "What has brought that up, Uzumaki-san? With your position in the shinobi force, it shouldn't be hard for you to learn what I was really doing the past 3 months. I was learning to control the Kyuubi's chakra." Hiashi nodded his head in affirmation. "So I am trying to control the wild and terrible chakra of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the bogeyman of this entire village's dreams for the past 8 years. It could get dangerous for me and my friends around me one day." Hiashi put his scroll down as he leaned back into the chair deep in thought. After a long moment, he spoke up. "I will admit I did think about possible situations between you and my daughters that would not end favorably for everyone involved. However, these are just mere speculations. I feel if one of these situations ever came to pass, we all would deal with whatever may happen at that time. Until then, I know for certain that my daughters implicitly trust you and are perfectly happy having you around. You are also doing wonders for Hinata's confidence issues. I don't see any reason why I have to be premature and try to change anything between the three of you. You're even directing my nephew's anger into improving himself constantly after what I just saw before dinner." Naruto flinched before doing his sheepish gesture with his free hand. "You saw? My eyes are not all seeing for nothing," Hiashi retorted with a smirk before continuing. "Uzumaki-san, my feeling is that you are doing a great service to this village by keeping the Kyuubi contained within you. That should have been good enough for you, but you're going above and beyond the call of duty by learning to be in control of the chakra, so may be able to grow stronger to protect people you consider important, even with a risk of anything going wrong in that quest." Naruto sat there with a blank face as he looked into Hiashi's sincere eyes. After a moment, he allowed a gentle smile to grow on his face. "Thanks, Hiashi-sama. It's the first time anyone in this village ever described my situation like that. I feel much better. I'll be careful about how I progress in my training, though. For everyone's sake." Hiashi allowed a small smile as he nodded. Another long silence followed as he returned to reading more of the scroll. Naruto grew bored with the two girls still clutching on to him. "Let's see how I should escape this booby trap of dangerous Juken strikes," he mumbled as Hiashi raised an eyebrow, his eyes never leaving the scroll. "I would think you would understand by now, Uzumaki-san. It is not possible to escape my daughters without suffering a strike or two in painful places," he dryly said. He could feel Naruto's foxy grin out of view. "I never give up. Besides, I have something new to try, Hiashi-sama." Hiashi heard a slight popping sound. Intrigued, he looked over to see a confused-looking clone of Naruto standing behind the sofa that the original and his daughters were on. Naruto then did a simple series of hand seals, and there was another puff of smoke. It was not hard for Hiashi to see that the original did a kawarimi with the clone, leaving the poor clone to precariously hold his daughter's dangerous sleeping habits at bay. The original displayed a triumphant grin while the clone shifted nervously under the girl's tightening grips. "That takes care of that. Hold down the fort for me, would ya, buddy?" The original patted his clone's head, which glowered at the boss's cruelty. Hiashi smirked as he saw an idea clearly form in the clone's head, and it showed an evil smirk. It then did the same series of seals and another puff of smoke followed. "Huh?" was Naruto's intelligent reply as he found himself back under the two girls' clutches, and the clone was standing behind the sofa with a shit-eating grin. "It's you who should be holding down the fort, boss. Jana," the clone said cheerfully before dispelling itself. It took a moment for Naruto to realize that his clone pulled a fast one on its own creator. An annoyed frown formed on the blonde's face. "Just why can't I get away from here?" he sounded in dejection. Another pleasant evening for me to remember," Hiashi amusedly thought as he watched Naruto get flustered under his daughter's clutches. 5 days later at the main gate into Konoha. Newly promoted Chunins Izumo and Kitetsu, who would soon be known as the Eternal Chunins in the future, were spending their day at the main gate's guardhouse. "Man, this is bullshit. We finally get promoted after 5 years of being genin, we even came close to being called the Eternal Genins, and they stick us in this damn guardhouse," Kitetsu complained. "Shut up. You should see this as a great honor to serve the village by protecting it from hostiles trying to sneak past us," Izumo retorted harshly. Before they were able to argue further, they noticed a large party of foreign nins with a man in a large official-looking Haori and a prepubescent dirty blonde-haired girl walking alongside him at the front of the party. The guards remained silent but on guard for any possible attack as the foreign nins stopped at a short distance before the gate, allowing the leader and the young girl to walk up to the guardhouse alone, an apparent attempt to calm any tension. "I am the 4th Kazekage and this is my daughter Sabaku no Tamari." The veiled man in a robe and hat similar to the Hokage's, only with dark blue accents instead of red, introduced himself and the blonde girl. The young but pretty girl with her hair tied into 4 pigtails shot a hard look at the guards before nodding stiffly. The Kazekage continued. "We come from Sunagakure and I was invited here by Hokage Dono to discuss several items about our alliance. Here is the message from Hokage Dono." Izumo nervously took the scroll to open it slowly. He easily confirmed the Hokage's handwriting and his official seal on the letter. He rolled it back up and handed it back to the Kazekage respectfully. "Welcome to Konohagakure, Kazekage-sama and Sabaku-sama. I will escort you and your party to meet up with the Hokage. He is expecting you," he stiffly said with a respectful bow. The Kazekage simply nodded for the guard to continue. Izumo turned around and led the Suna party into the village, leaving Kitetsu alone at the guardhouse. He let out a sigh. "Well, that was interesting. That blonde girl's would have been very cute if she'd been closer to our age. Though she looked like she'd rather be anywhere but here next to her father. Wonder why that is." He mused while he was moving to get back to his seat. As he was about to sit down, he noticed something far down the road from the gate, a green speck on the horizon. Curious, the guard decided to walk down the road to get a closer look at the odd sight. Realization slowly crept on him as he got closer and broke into an easy run. Upon arriving at the green speck, he finally confirmed this to be the beaten and battered body of Mido Guy. "What the hell happened here, Guy-san?" Kitetsu inquired with worry as he bent down to the body to check for any wound. There were none, but the body stunk, as if it acclimated a week's worth of sweat without cleaning up. "Ugh, my youthfulness is rather drained. Water please," Guy managed to get out. Kitetsu sighed and shrugged as he reached for his canteen to pour some water through Guy's parched lips. "My advice to you, young one, don't ever challenge Uzumaki Naruto to any contest of youthfulness. He will beat you," Guy painfully warned as if he was drawing his last breath and trying to identify whoever murdered him. Kitetsu shook his head and laughed. "That blonde brat. The entire village could have warned you about that before you did whatever you tried with him. Don't mess with the prankster king of Konoha." After a few minutes, Guy finally regained enough strength to stand up and be helped into the village by Kitetsu, mumbling about depleted youth the whole way. 3 days ago in Sunagakure. "Boy, Kankuro. Stop wearing women's makeup around the house. It's creepy." 11-year-old Sabaku no Tamari yelled angrily at her younger brother. 10-year-old Kankuro promptly displayed an outraged expression, his face completely covered in white paint with some red streaking across his cheeks. The cute young blonde girl, his affronted expression looked utterly ridiculous, reminding her of a clown. "It's not makeup. It's war paint. You look like a clown preparing for war then." "Oh, you did not just go there, bitch." "I just did, asshole. What are you gonna do about it, you circus reject?" This went back and forth for a few minutes in the common room of the Sabaku mansion, and they were about to come to blows. Meanwhile, their 9-year-old brother, Gaara, was sitting on a windowsill on the far wall, staring out over the populace of Suna below. He was beginning to get irritated, and that did not bode well for anyone in the vicinity. When he was not having one of his psychotic spells, he was normally a quiet and cold boy who had no interest in the people around him. Unfortunately, listening to his older siblings' incessant arguing was getting on his nerves, and he was about to have another one of his episodes. Normally, Temari and Kankuro would have been quiet and careful around their youngest brother. However, the stress of being tense all the time living in the same house with a psychotic killer and having it going on so long got to the two siblings, and they promptly forgot where they were. "Shut up," a chilling whisper that somehow reached them all the way across the room stopped their arguing instantly. Their angry and glaring expressions seemed to melt slowly into ones of absolute dread as they robotically swiveled their heads in the direction of a twitching Gaara. At that point, the red-headed boy's killing intent crashed into them, and they stumbled back before freezing up in terror at the feeling of death washing over them. "You have annoyed me long enough, and mother is calling for your blood." Gaara raised his cold voice into almost a roar at the end as he summoned some sand from his gourd. It shot out toward the other two siblings, shaped like a giant tendril. Before the petrified Kankuro could react, he was violently knocked back by the whipping sand into a wall, leaving him unconscious instantly. Temari became even more terrified at what was happening as she took up a defensive position, her legs refusing to take her out of the living room and get away. Gaara smiled insanely as he raised an outstretched hand, and his sand was now crawling toward the unconscious Kankuro. Temari, upon seeing this, felt her feet move forward, not backward like she wanted. Next thing she knew, she was standing in front of her unconscious brother, staring at a giant swell of sand about to cover her, even as she tried to blow it back with gusts of wind from a small fan she usually carried on her person. "What the hell am I doing? Why am I trying to protect Kankuro? We don't even get along." Even as she thought those things, she knew why she was doing this. A small and weak but resilient part of her continued to wish to be a real family with her siblings someday, and she knew she'd protect Kankuro and even Gaara if he ever found himself outmatched, despite how extremely unlikely that was. They were all children of her beloved mother, and she knew Kurura would have wanted nothing more than to see them all get along. The larger part of her cursed this desire bitterly for her stupidity, since she was going to pay with her life now. The sand splashing onto her body interrupted any more thought. She whimpered fearfully as she tried to blow the sand off to no avail. After some struggling, her fan was knocked out of her hand, leaving her defenseless. She looked up into Gaara's maniac eyes, and his insane smile froze her insides worse than the feel of the sentient sand crawling up to her chest. "Gaara, why are you doing this? We're your siblings' family. We're not supposed to hurt each other," she pleaded tearfully. She thought it was her imagination that the sand stopped its movement for an instant, and there was a flash of something in her brother's pale green eyes. That thought was gone in the next instant when the sand continued its progress up to her neck. A chilling and gravelly voice made her shiver even with the sentient sand restricting her movement. "Our uncle tried to kill me. Even now, our own father," Gaara spat out that word hatefully, "is allowing assassins to come after me. How should I believe the rest of you won't try anything with me as well?" She had no reply for that. "Besides, mother desires your blood and I won't disappoint her." Even now, Temari had to allow a tear as she felt immense pity for her own brother, who'd rather listen to a monster instead of his own kin. She wished she could have at least done something differently to keep Gaara from reaching this point, but it was now too late. "This is it. In the next 5 seconds he's going to do the Sabaku Sozo, then my blood and insides will splatter all over this room in my own home. This isn't how I want it to go." She took one last panicked gasp of breath before the sand covered her mouth. She could see Gaara lifting his hand up, fingers spread out as if he was holding an imaginary cup. In the next moment he would clench that fist, and Temari would be no more in this world, with Kankuro following soon after. Accepting her fate, the quad-pigtailed blonde stayed still inside the shifting sand for what seemed like an eternity, awaiting her death. She knew something was wrong when she didn't feel dead yet. Instead, she felt an odd shifting sensation all over her body and the sand covering her seemed to vibrate erratically. In the next second, it began to dribble off her body quickly in large globs, as if it seemed to have just died. Shocked that she was still alive somehow, she stumbled and fell backward out of the rest of the sand, landing on her backside against the wall next to the still unconscious Kankuro. Sighing in relief and exhaustion from the ordeal, she looked up to see what stopped Gaara. Rasa, the fourth Kazukiage, was standing at the doorway into the room holding an outstretched hand up with a slightly alarmed expression. She glanced over at the pile of sand that was covering her and saw it was glittering unusually. She realized now that her father saved her by quickly mixing his gold dust with Gaara's sand to slow it down and disable it. She heard an inhuman yell of frustration and jolted to see Gaara clutching at his head and what sand he could move was thrashing around him. In the next instant, a large golden bundle of sand shot at him. It split into two smaller pieces and they wrapped around his legs and arms respectfully to bind him. Finally subdued, he fell over and hit the floor hard, yet his frantic yells continued for being denied his kills. Temari stared blankly up at the ceiling after this was all over and covered her ears to block out Gaara's insanity. She began to shake and cry as she repeatedly went over the past few minutes in her mind, focusing on how close she came to dying at her own brother's hands. Rasa glanced over at his daughter, whose body was shaking and racking with sobs, and felt a small twinge of sadness in his chest. He decided at that moment she needed some fresh air and he would take her out of town on a long walk to Konoha to help her clear her mind. He'd leave Gaara with his right-hand man Baki to keep him under control, and Kankuro would be content locking himself in his room tinkering with the puppets. Present, in the tower outside the Hokage's office. Temari. The Kazukiya's voice pulled the young girl out of her thoughts. She looked up to his veiled face, giving him her attention. We are about to meet the Hokage. Be sure to be on your best behavior. She only nodded once and turned to look straight ahead with a somewhat dead expression on her face. They waited a moment before the Chunin secretary appeared and bowed to them. She told them the meeting had been moved to the formal hall a few doors down. Rasa quirked an eyebrow at that but decided not to dwell on this detail. They walked a short distance down the hall and waited while the secretary opened the door to stick her head in and inform the people inside that the guests were here. They heard a commenter and the Chunin opened the door wide for the two guests to step inside. The sight of this room impressed the two guests. It was set up like a traditional meeting hall, with two rows of cushions facing toward a raised platform at the far wall of the room. The entire wall was displaying an intricate mural of a large forest of dark green trees surrounding a large golden flame, apparently alluding to Konoha's famous motto, the will of fire. On the raised platform underneath the mural was a frame holding up a one-way transparent veil. Anyone facing the veil would only see shadows behind it. The guests noted there was a silhouette shaped like the third Hokage. The Kazukiya bowed while Temari did the same, but her eyes were on someone else. She was somewhat curious about the tied-up blonde and whiskered boy wearing a bright orange jumpsuit sitting to the side by the raised platform. His eyes were squinted fox-like and he had a childish pout on his face as he seemed to be grumbling about something. Rasa never glanced over at the boy even once as he took his seat on the cushion closest to the platform while his daughter took a cushion behind and to the right of him. Thank you for your hospitality, Hirazendono. This is my daughter, Temari. He indicated his daughter before continuing. Though I do have to say I am curious about your use of the screen. It is my first time seeing you behind that in all of our meetings so far. Sarutobi Hiruzen had to sweat drop as he let out a brief chuckle. You are always welcome here anytime, Rasa Dono. My apologies for the sudden changes, but any time we met in Suna, you were usually sitting behind something similar to this. I thought I would give it a try for once. The Kazukiya allowed a nod of understanding even at this pitiful excuse. It is rather nice to seem a little mysterious, isn't it? Temari raised an eyebrow slightly at her father's casual and amused response to the sudden and unexplained changes. He never liked changes. Mentally shrugging it off, she then continued to glance over at the tied-up boy once in a while. She thought he was sniggering about something that she apparently was not in on. What is he finding so funny? Behind the veil, the god of shinobi silently cursed the young blonde boy nearby. It was bad enough he had to do something like this with important guests in order to hide himself from anyone's view. If one were to look behind the veil, their eyes would sear at the sight of his very bright neon orange Hokage outfit. This abominable color covered him top to bottom with blue accents. The worst part was the kanji on the back that read on loan from a future Hokage. Hiruzen had no idea how Naruto managed to get into his closet and hide his entire wardrobe, leaving only this one. He had no choice but to put it on. Upon arriving in the office, the Anbu guards promptly fell out of their shadows laughing. Before their embarrassed leader could even utter the order, one of them was already leaving to retrieve Naruto for him. He was busy scolding the boy and questioning him on the whereabout of his clothes when he got the message that the Kazukiya was here for a meeting. Slightly panicking, he changed the meeting to the formal hall and had a paper veil set up quickly. It would be too much for him to have the usually stoic Kazukiya even chuckle at his odd wardrobe. Did the young boy over there do something wrong? Rasa asked as he finally acknowledged Naruto's presence for the first time since he and Temari entered this room. This snapped the third out of his thoughts of revenge for a certain surrogate grandson. It's nothing too bad. I was scolding Naruto-kun here about a prank he played on me earlier this morning before you and your lovely daughter arrived. Oh? So are you planning a fitting punishment for him? Like execution or at least flogging? In my village, it is a crime to make a fool of the cage. Rasa asked with feigned seriousness. The boy flinched and sweated comically as he carefully glanced up at the Hokage. From where he was sitting, he was able to clearly see his surrogate grandfather from behind the veil. Damari had to hold back a smirk at the boy's predicament. Her father might be cold and stern, but even he wouldn't do something like that to anyone in Suna for something as minor as a prank. The Hokage seemed to have caught on, and he visibly brought a finger up to his chin and thought. You're right, Rasa Dono. Perhaps I have been far too lenient on him up until now. Flogging would be too cruel, but I can still hit him where it'd really hurt. How about I make a law forbidding a certain favorite food of his anywhere in the village? He mused to himself. Naruto looked up in shock at the third with a look of betrayal. You wouldn't do that. The Hokage shot him an annoyed glare. Keep trying me and I might just do that for real, you brat. Damari had to suppress a laugh at this exchange. Hiruzen then glanced over at the young blonde girl sitting behind the Kazekage and, upon seeing her expression clearly holding back the urge to laugh, wondered if she would have liked to at least enjoy herself on this short trip. Okay, I believe we have tormented the poor boy enough. Naruto openly showed his irritation at this. It's time we begin our discussion. You did tell me in your letter you were going to be here for a short time and you needed to get back to Suna as soon as possible. Rasa nodded in affirmation. Then, Rasa Dono, would your daughter appreciate a small tour around the village? I am sure she wouldn't want to sit through this boring meeting. Damari visibly perked up at that. She'd rather be elsewhere so she didn't have to be around her father any longer than necessary. Rasa seemed to think for a minute before replying. That is an excellent suggestion, Hiruzen Dono. It is her first time visiting this village after all. Would you like that, Tamari? Yes, Kazekage-sama. His daughter replied neutrally, though she felt relief at not having to sit through this meeting. The Hokage and even Naruto quirked their eyebrows at the girl's stiff address toward her own father. It did not seem to bother the Kazekage, however. Excellent. Naruto-kun, think of this as your punishment for what you did earlier. Please escort Kazekage Dono's daughter for the day and be on your best behavior. You will meet us at the main gate at 5. The Hokage commanded of the boy, his expression growing serious. Naruto knew not to mess with the old man like this, so he responded with a silent nod. At that moment, he heard a thunk and glanced down to see a kunai stuck into the floor next to him. Hiruzen apparently threw it, and the boy did not even see him move. It cut the rope binding him, and the freed boy slipped the threads off easily enough. Gulping at this method, he rose to his feet and moved to the blonde girl. He then respectfully bowed, remembering the etiquette lessons beaten into him by Yoshino. Hello, my name is Uzumaki Naruto. It's nice to meet you. Damari smiled briefly at the boy's respectful behavior. Despite his ugly orange jumpsuit, she thought he was cute, especially with those gorgeous deep blue eyes, whiskers that made him seem a little rugged, and beautiful sun-kissed blonde hair that she'd kill to have instead of her own hair color. She rose to her feet as well and politely bowed to him. Naruto noticed she was taller than him by a little bit, so apparently she was at least a couple years older. She had slatted teal eyes that made her look somewhat exotic, and her thick dirty blonde hair was tied up into 4 short and bushy pigtails. He thought the unusual style suited her. She was wearing a black battle kimono that went down from her neck to her calves in a somewhat conservative style. She finished it off with a large white sash around her waist, black sandals, and fingerless gloves. She certainly had the image of an aspiring and serious kunoichi down pat, and he knew she was going to be devastatingly beautiful as an adult. He noted a small ornate fan tucked into the sash and wondered if she was learning to use battle fans as a kenjutsu style. He saw that style while he was searching for his own and thought it was noble of her that she was learning a difficult but powerful style. He deduced she was primarily wind-natured like it was required to effectively use that style. Uzumaki-san, it is a pleasure to meet you too. I am Sabaku no Tamari and I look forward to your guidance. The blonde girl spoke formally as she finished her bow. You can call me Naruto, Sabaku-san. I'm not one for formalities unless I have to. Naruto replied easily with a friendly smile. Then I would prefer to go by Tamari as well, Naruto-san. I have 2 siblings so it gets confusing with just the surname. The boy nodded as he walked off toward the door, followed by Tamari. Stopping at the door, they turned around and bowed to the cages before stepping out. After the door closed, the Kazekage slowly removed his face veil and turned to his fire counterpart with a smirk. Now that it's just the 2 of us, please tell me, Hiruzen Dono, exactly why you are hiding behind that screen. I assume it has something to do with that young boy's prank you were scolding him about. The Hokage visibly cringed and sighed in defeat as he stood up to slowly step out from behind the screen, his all-orange Hokage robes now in full view. There was a dead silence for a minute as both cages stared at each other. Hiruzen's expression was one of extreme resignation, while Rasa's was one of visible shock as his lips began to twitch upward. Outside with Tamari and Naruto, they heard loud laughter erupt from the room they just left. That was the Kazekage's voice. He never laughs. The blonde girl murmured in shock with a small shudder. The old man told a funny joke. The other blonde cheekily said with a foxy grin, deciding not to elaborate further on the details as they used the stairs leading down. Tamari was slightly confused at how he addressed the Hokage, but decided not to inquire about that for now, as she was just too stunned over hearing her father laugh heartily like that for the first time ever in her life. So is there anything in particular you'd like to do, Tamari-san? Naruto cut into her daze as they stepped outside onto the street in front of the tower. She just shrugged with a neutral expression. Thanks to having Gaara as her brother, her brash and blunt nature, and the fact her father was the Kazekage, any children her age would not play with her. Aside from training, she rarely did anything fun, since Suna was not a friendly place with its harsh desert environment. Life there was more about surviving rather than enjoying anything. So she only had two hobbies. Floral appreciation and that. She would be embarrassed if anyone found out about it, since it could ruin the tough image she built up if word got out. Okay then, how about ice cream? What's that? Naruto faulted. Wait, you've never had it? He exclaimed as he stared at Tamari as if she grew a new head. She found his awestruck expression irritating as he apparently was referring to a luxury item that the other villages took for granted compared to her home village. She had been through this many times with visiting dignitaries. Suna is different from Konoha in that we spend most of our time just surviving and making sure we have enough crop, imported goods, and water to live on. We never had much time for luxuries that you Konoha people apparently do. She replied in a cold tone. She apparently did not appreciate being reminded that the other great shinobi villages prospered compared to her own. The tone gave Naruto a shiver. I thought she seemed like a nice person at first. Don't be quick to make decisions about her. You never were able to have much until recently, so remember that as you think in her position. People in Suna spend their whole lives without what you have been able to enjoy over the past couple years. Of course she would hate to be reminded of what Suna doesn't have. I guess I should be more tactful. Just try not to cause an international incident. Boy. Do I look like the type to do that? He felt Kurama pause at his apparently rhetorical question and had a feeling he knew what she was going to say. Is that a trick question? Because we both know I'd be lying if I said no. Damn you. Sorry, I was surprised since I just could not fathom that no one has heard of ice cream. It's quite good. I'll take you to this place and you can try it if you'd like, Tamari-san. He offered as he tried to ignore Kurama's laughter in his head. Tamari stared at him for a long moment, making him sweat a bit. Okay. Lead the way, Naruto-san. They began walking in the direction of the ice cream parlor. Almost right away, the young woman noticed nasty glares directed at her escort from the villagers around them. She glanced over at Naruto, and it was obvious he was deliberately ignoring the attention. She decided to inquire about this. Naruto-san, I'm noticing people around us are shooting you nasty glares. Did you do something to make them angry at you? Naruto whipped his head at her, surprised at her directness so soon into their first meeting. She doesn't beat around the bush, does she? Blunt and not afraid to speak her mind, almost the opposite from your shy friend. I already like this female. Yeah. I have quite a reputation in this village as a prankster. There aren't many people here that I haven't pranked. Hell, I even pranked the old man, the Hokage, just this morning. Tamari narrowed her eyes at him. Her slatted eyes easily made this expression more imposing, and he shrank back a little. He knew somehow that she could tell he was staying away from the real reason. The older girl could tell the glares were not simply because of his pranks. It went deeper than that. The only reason she could think of that a young boy like him would receive so much hate was that if he had been born from a family who betrayed the village in some way in the past, or he was like Gaara. She shuddered at that thought and could not believe this blonde boy, who was obviously sane and seemed kind, would hold a demon within. Although she was curious about his history, she decided to be tactful and leave the topic at that. Upon arriving in front of the ice cream parlor, Naruto was dismayed to discover that it was closed for the day due to an issue with the freezer. He looked at Tamari apologetically while she stared back with some disappointment in her escort's ability to entertain her. Growing nervous, Naruto suggested a sweet shop as the next destination. Not surprisingly, Tamari was intrigued by the prospect of a shop that sold nothing but desserts, which she only had several times in her life. Arriving at the shop, they were disappointed to find it closed because of a shortage of flour and sugar. Damn it. Why the hell won't this damn village let me entertain one simple guest? The boy protested to no one in particular. Tamari had to hold back a smirk. While this visit might not have been going well, she had to admit she found this boy's expressive and goofy nature entertaining. I know. How about a quick stop at the Ichiraku stand? They make delicious ramen with many different flavors. It's definitely open. Naruto declared, now clearly grasping at straws. Tamari never had ramen before and she was curious about it, so she simply nodded her head. The quick walk later found Naruto on all fours in front of the ramen stand, crying dramatically as he repeatedly hammered a fist on the ground. Temari was standing next to him with a blank expression, staring at the stand that had its shutters down. A small note posted on a shutter explained that the owner and his daughter were out of town for a merchant's retreat. "How could you, Tuchi-san and Am-chan? The one time I really needed you, you betray my trust." Naruto cried melodramatically to the sky. Temari just shook her head at her escort's antics. "Definitely open, huh?" She deadpanned with a cool tone that froze Naruto in his tirade. She then let out a tired sigh. "I guess it's no good, Naruto-san. I should go back to the tower and wait for the meeting to end. I appreciate your effort, but it looks like Kami is against us today for some reason." Naruto opened his mouth and looked like he was about to persuade her otherwise, but slumped his head dejectedly. "I guess it's for the best. Sorry we could not do anything today, Temari-san. I'm betting if I try to suggest another place, it'll explode into a massive fireball just to spite the hell out of me. It just isn't my day." Temari allowed a small smile at his grumbling. It was refreshing to have someone, especially a boy near her age, be completely himself instead of tiptoeing on eggshells around her. She knew the reason for this was because he did not know she was the sister of the feared Gaara, Jinchuriki of the Ichibi. Therefore, he had no reason to fear being near her. She had to hold back a sad frown at that thought. She forgot to remember that she was also the daughter of the Kazekage, a person only slightly less intimidating than Gaara, and yet Naruto wasn't nervous anyway. This wouldn't register with her until a long time later. They then began their trek back toward the tower with the boy a step ahead of the older girl. As they were walking down a street lined with shops, one of the window displays caught Temari's eye. As she turned her head to have a better look, her eyes widened. "So, Temari-san, mind telling me a bit more about Suna? I've never been outside of this village so I always wondered what other places are like." Naruto suddenly asked as he walked with both arms behind his head. He didn't get a response. "Sorry, I guess you have to be secretive about your village, even though we're allied. I just wanted to know what life in your village was like in general, not its secrets." The nervous boy tried to clarify. When he still heard nothing, he was starting to get irritated. "Look, Temari-san, it's fine if you don't want to talk about it, but you could at least respond." He trailed off as he realized that his guest was not next to her. He stopped in his track and whipped his head around to look for the blonde girl. He immediately found her standing in front of a shop with her hands on the storefront window, and her nose was almost pressing against it. Curious about what caught her attention, he walked over to her. He saw that it was a handcrafting shop and took a glance at the window display. He noticed his fellow blonde was hungrily eyeing a group of small and cute animal-themed knitted dolls. Drool was practically coming out of her open mouth as she whispered cute to no one in particular. Naruto was so stunned that he saw his older and somewhat proper guest become like this that he just stared with his mouth agape. Temari jolted out of her trance and remembered where she was. She quickly straightened up as she glanced around nervously, hoping that no one saw. To her horror, she immediately found Naruto standing next to her with a dumb expression on his face, as if he couldn't believe what he had seen. "You saw?" she whispered in a trembling voice as she let her long bangs overshadow her eyes. Naruto jolted in surprise at the threatening tone in her voice. He spent enough time with Ino to know that he had upset this girl greatly, even though he didn't think he did anything wrong. "You saw. Therefore, you must die." Temari intoned with a blank expression as she reached for the ornate fan stuck in her sash. Naruto nervously took a step back as she promptly lunged forward, snapping the small fan open. The boy responded by gracefully jumping into a backward somersault to avoid her swipe. He wasn't expecting to be hit with a strong gust of wind generated by the swipe as he landed, however, and was blown back several meters. He would have been blown all the way across the street into a wall if he hadn't instinctively stuck to the ground with chakra in his feet. She definitely has wind nature. For her to be able to generate that much wind without seals, she is very impressive. She will be a powerful kunoichi in the future. Kurama observed, not at all concerned her host was being attacked by this girl. "You're no help, damn fox." Temari continued her charge forward, her expression determined as she struck with several kicks and jabs. Naruto was impressed with her level of taijutsu as he deftly dodged her attacks. He knew many aspiring war fan users usually focused on long-range attacks and only used defensive styles for taijutsu in case opponents got close somehow. He then quickly remembered this wasn't the time to be impressed as he was nearly blown off his feet again by another swing of his guest's fan. Many bystanders were watching this little scuffle, amused at a pair of children playing around. Meanwhile, the Anbu standing watch over the pair from the shadows were nervously praying to every deity for their blonde nemesis to not cause an international incident. "Boy, wait. I didn't do anything wrong. Don't tell me this is because I just discovered you have a cute hobby. Just how far will you go? You don't need to prove that you're already strong." Naruto quickly said with both his hands up in front of him. Tamari suddenly stopped her next swipe just when the fan was about to hit him. She blinked owlishly at his nervous expression. You don't think it's weak? Of course not. You're strong and I can tell that from the last couple minutes. Just because you have a cute side doesn't mean you should hide it all the time. Hearing that, she blushed adorably as she let her fan fall out of her limp fingers and dangled by its strap around her wrist. She then squatted down in the middle of the street with her knees touching her chest and covered her reddening face with both hands. Seeing this from whom he deemed to be a strong and prideful girl made his cheek slightly pink. He and many onlookers watching this thought the same thing. She couldn't get any more cuter than this if she tried. It would be too boring if she's just proud and stiff all the time. It's nice she has this side. It sounds like you're trying to talk Tamari-san up to me for some reason, because I don't know why else you would be interested in other puny humans. Kurama just shrugged. I'm just saying what's on my mind. He figured he wasn't going to get any more out of her about this and decided to put that aside. He squatted down so he'd be level with Tamari. Tamari-san, if you'd like, we can go into that shop and see if we can get you a couple of these dolls. He offered. His guest perked her head up at that, her embarrassment completely forgotten. Her teal eyes sparkled with a bright smile, lighting up her adorably childish expression at the thought of pursuing her now not-so-secret hobby. Naruto was almost compelled to bring a hand up to block the imaginary light radiating off her in waves. Okay, I was wrong. She just got cuter. Ah. All this cuteness is killing my mojo. 15 minutes later found both blondes stepping out of the shop. Tamari was displaying a happy and content smile as she was holding and petting a knitted doll that looked like a weasel in her hands. Naruto smiled at this display, happy he finally got to see his guest open up a little. So you have a hobby of collecting and knitting your own dolls. I think it suits you, Tamari-san. He remarked. Tamari blushed slightly at her escort's compliment as she tucked the new doll away in her waist pouch. I keep a small collection at home. Only my brothers know of this, so you're the first one aside from family to find out. They're kin to my pretend friends because I don't have any back in Suna. She trailed off, surprised that she told a boy she just met a foreign one even something like that. She just felt so calm around Naruto that it seemed natural to open up a little. She glanced warily over at her fellow blonde, expecting to be made fun of. To her surprise, he just nodded with a cute foxy expression as if he seemed to understand. I know the feeling. I'm an orphan and I live by myself. Until recently I didn't have friends so I just talked to the plants I keep around my apartment once in a while. Still do even now. Naruto replied without any hesitation. Tamari smiled at her escort's honesty. So you got a green thumb, huh? Didn't peg you for that type. She teased lightheartedly. Didn't peg you as the knitting type. Touché, Naruto-san. As they were chuckling, a young girl's voice cut into their pleasant atmosphere. Naruto. I wasn't expecting to run into you here. Both blondes followed the voice down the street to find another one of their kind, a cute young girl with shoulder-length platinum blonde hair. She was dressed in shorts and a tank top, a good choice for this warm day. She was standing next to a beautiful brown-haired woman in a light yellow sundress. As she was so young-looking and shared many features with the other girl, Tamari automatically assumed them to be sisters. Ino-chan, Kana-chan. Naruto called back with a bright smile as the duo moved close to them. Tamari noted the one called Kana was watching her carefully and had a feeling this woman was a kunoichi like she aspired to be. Ino hopped on Naruto for a quick hug, not noticing the blush on his face, but someone did when Kana mentally filed this moment away for future blackmail material. What are you doing here? You don't normally come to this area. And who's this? She inquired before finally noticing the older and rather pretty girl standing next to him. Her eyes narrowed subconsciously as she felt an unknown twinge deep within, but ignored it. She would realize much later that it was a tiny and jealous voice squeaking at her to defend her territory with extreme force. I'm showing her around this village. He replied before politely gesturing to Tamari, who bowed slightly. This is Sabaku no Tamari. She's from Suna with the Kazuki-age on a diplomatic trip and it's her first time here. He introduced, tactfully leaving out the part about her being a Kage's daughter. Kana, being a retired kunoichi, immediately knew exactly who this girl was from the surname, but didn't react other than an interested eyebrow. Ino continued to watch with slightly narrowed eyes. This is Yamanaka Ino, one of my best friends, and that's her mom, Kana. Naruto finished the introductions. It took Tamari a moment for what her escort said to hit her. You're her mother. I thought you were sisters. She blurted out before she could stop herself and promptly slapped a hand over her mouth in embarrassment which grew when the other blonde snickered quietly. Kana let out a lovely laugh and tilted her head to the side with a dainty hand on her slightly pink cheek. I can't help but feel so young every time anyone made that assumption. She stated with the poise of a mature woman, but it was clear to everyone she was very pleased with the unintentional compliment. Tamari-san, if you're part of a diplomatic party, then wouldn't it make sense for someone from our shinobi ranks to escort you instead? Why's Naruto here with you? Ino inquired just a bit bluntly and did not miss her friend flinching at the question. Tamari smirked as she pointedly ignored the silent but desperate shushing from her escort standing behind Ino. Apparently he pranked your esteemed leader and he's escorting me as punishment. Naruto. You actually pranked the Hokage, Ino exclaimed as she snapped around with narrowed eyes at her friend, who shrank back slightly with a gulp. It seems I may have to remind Yoshino-chan to give you more etiquette lessons, especially in learning respect for your elders and superiors. Kana stated in a cheerful voice. Naruto paled considerably at that threat. No. Anything but that, please. He cried out as he sank to his knees in a pleading posture before the giggling brunette while Ino shook her head with a sigh. Tamari raised a curious eyebrow about this Yoshino. Her escort didn't give the impression that he scared easily, as evidenced by his blatant pranking of the Hokage himself. This woman would have to be a terrifying monster to elicit such a reaction from him. Meanwhile in the Nara compound. The beautiful, petite and slender woman in a non-threatening housewife dress, with her long black hair pulled back into a ponytail and two long but thin bangs framing her face, let out a cute sneeze. Why do I suddenly feel like I'll have to give Naruto-kun more of my special lessons? She muttered lowly with an annoyed frown as she rubbed her small nose. Shikamaru and Shikaku, lounging lazily on the rear porch nearby, shivered involuntarily upon hearing her statement. It seems your friend is going to get into a troublesome situation soon. The older man grumbled lazily. His son nodded slowly. Troublesome. Back with the others. How are you liking Kana Hagakure so far, Tamari-san? Kana inquired, smirking at Naruto squatting down nearby with a depressing rain cloud over his head. Ino was patting his back pityingly, even though she had an amused grin as well. It is a beautiful village in its own right and Naruto-san has been keeping me entertained. Tamari replied politely, though there was some amusement in her teal eyes as she remembered her escort's earlier goofiness. Kana giggled as if she knew what the young blonde was thinking. Knowing Naruto, he either made goofy mistakes or had a humorous streak of bad luck that somehow kept this foreign guest entertained either way. He's quite a nice young man when he's not being so mischievous and you just have to remember he always means well in the end. You couldn't ask for a better escort, in my opinion. Ino, upon hearing this, frowned slightly. She was wondering why her mother sounded like she was talking up Naruto for Tamari. She didn't say anything though. Meanwhile, Naruto already recovered by now and moved to stand by his guest. What are you ladies doing out here anyway? Is the shop closed for some reason? He quizzed. Kana and Ino seemed to have remembered something and the older woman tilted her head to the side again. I'm afraid we're running late. We've been on our lunch break from work. She stated calmly, making her daughter groan and slump into a minor depression at the reminder of having to work again. Tamari bowed slightly to the Yamanaka duo. It is a pleasure meeting you. I'm glad I could speak with more citizens of this village and thank you for your time. I'm always happy to meet anyone from outside, especially one with such high standing. Kar replied slyly, smirking a little upon seeing Naruto and Tamari stiffen at being found out. After exchanging goodbyes, the Yamanaka pair continued on their way to the floral shop. Kana noticed her daughter was frowning and glancing over her shoulder at the retreating backs of Naruto and Tamari going down another way. Mom, why did you talk Naruto up with that girl? You sound like you usually do when you're trying to play matchmaker. Ino spoke in a somewhat irritated tone. She also didn't forget the fact her mother's past matchmaking predictions usually turned out to be correct and those couples ended up being more than happy. Kana had to hide her ecstatic grin at this obvious display of jealousy. Perhaps there might be some hope for her desire to see Naruto and her daughter together in the future. To say she had a small disdain for Ino pining after that Uchiha boy was to say she looked just a little young. Sweetie, it's just harmless chatter. Let your mother have some fun once in a while, won't you? Besides, it seems they might have more in common than you realize. She teased, slyly alluding to the fact both Naruto and Tamari were children of cages. Ino of course took that statement in a different way as she forced down a possessive snarl, though she didn't know why she was feeling so upset. As Kana watched her daughter fume silently, she made a mental note to prepare in-depth lessons about clan bylaws soon in order for Ino to understand what she might have to expect in the future. Considering Naruto's lineage, attractive looks and irresistible personality, the Yamanaka matriarch knew things were going to get interesting for her pseudo-son soon. They were nice. Tamari stated neutrally after a few minutes as she and Naruto were now walking aimlessly through a small park. They apparently forgot about her wanting to get back to the tower after that encounter. The other blonde turned to her with a bright smile that Tamari was beginning to realize she enjoyed seeing. They're the greatest. Kana-chan used to take care of me on and off for a while until I got on my own feet. She and Nari Yoshino were the ones who taught me everything I needed to know in my early years. He replied with fondness in his tone for the women he considered to be his mother figures. And no chance, she's my first friend ever and I'll always stick with her through anything for that. He finished with even more affection in his voice at the thought of the Yamanaka heiress. Temari could tell he cared so much for this Ino that even she was beginning to get envious of that affection. She also could tell he felt for her more than a friend should, but decided not to press on that. This was between them. As they settled into a comfortable silence while taking in the sights around the park, Naruto noticed how Temari seemed to enjoy the scenery. Having an idea, he checked the position of the sun in the sky and deduced that they had about 2 hours until the cage's meeting was over. He then decided to show her his new favorite spot. "Temari-san, mind coming with me? I just thought of a place I think you'd like," he suggested with a smile. Temari glanced over at her escort with some trepidation about trying another place with their recent luck, but she saw the eagerness in his deep blue eyes. Having come to a decision, she nodded and they both headed off in a new direction. 30 minutes later. They found themselves standing on top of the Hokage monument, more specifically on top of the 4th Hokage's bust. The view overlooking the entire village of Konoha was breathtaking, and Temari took in the beautiful scenery with awe. She noticed Naruto sitting down on the stone surface and decided to sit next to him with their shoulders almost touching. They sat in silence for a while as she absent-mindedly fiddled with her new weasel doll in her hands. "It's obvious this spot is special to you, Naruto-san," she stated, having watched Naruto seem to just relax as soon as they came to this spot. It was like he was opening up even more than usual. "Why take me here?" she finally asked after seeing her escort's quizzical expression. "Why not? I noticed how you enjoy nature from our walk through the park, so I thought you'd like it up here. It's pretty and feels relaxing to just sit here, doesn't it?" Temari had to agree as she could easily feel some worry in her body slowly leak out. She let out a relieved sigh as she allowed herself to relax around Naruto. Somehow she had a feeling she could trust him. They were silent for a long time until Temari finally spoke. "My youngest brother tried to kill me the other day." She didn't understand why she was telling this to someone she just met, but she felt immensely comfortable with him. Small tears stung her eyes as she could feel Naruto whip his head toward her in shock. He remained silent though, apparently an indication she could continue if she wanted. She went on to explain how her brother was being driven insane by a power inside him and their father didn't care, preferring to make his own son into a more effective weapon. Hence why she was cold toward her own father, among many other reasons. She elaborated on what happened last time he went insane and that it was the closest she came to being killed. Throughout this explanation she broke down further into silently weeping as Naruto carefully rubbed her back. By the end, she let it all out and was leaning against him for comfort. A long silence followed before he finally spoke up. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that for most of your life. I never had any family so I can't imagine what it's like to be hurt by a close relative. Tell you what, I'm training to become the strongest shinobi ever. Next time you come here, bring your brother along. I'll bust him down a peg or two and teach him to appreciate his siblings more," he stated with a bright smile in an attempt to cheer Temari up. She allowed a small laugh as she dried her tears off. "Not in that horrible outfit, you won't. You won't survive long in the shinobi world dressed like that," she retorted and then giggled uncharacteristically when Naruto huffed at her teasing. "Would it help if I told you entire squads of Anbu couldn't find me, even if their lives depended on it, when I actually get serious about hiding from them?" Temari remained unconvinced. "This, I'd have to see to believe it. I'd show you, but right now it's about time for your dad to leave, so I'll have to take you back to the main gate," Naruto announced as he checked the position of the sun. Temari sighed in disappointment at having to part like this so suddenly, but nodded as they both got to their feet to walk back down to the gate. As they were walking and making small talk, Kurama suddenly spoke up. "Naruto. That girl's brother, she mentioned him as being able to control sand. You should be careful around him if you meet him in the future." "Something I need to know?" "Yes. The Ichibi has the ability to control sand. His name is Shukaku and he is very bloodthirsty and insane. He'd try to influence his host's mind if he could. I wouldn't be surprised if this girl's brother is the host and is going insane thanks to that. While Shukaku is weak compared to me in terms of power, he is very adaptable and crafty with the use of sand. Watch yourself around this boy in the future." Naruto mentally nodded his head, deciding to file that information away for later. "So the reason she's been having a hellish life is most likely because of a Jinchuriki. I can't see anything going over well if she finds out I'm one too. Sorry you have to deal with this." Naruto gave a mental shrug. "No big deal. I'd hate for her to react badly, but if that happens, then there's nothing I can do but move on. We're linked like this for the rest of my life, and there will always be people who can't accept that fact, so I'll just be happy with a few people who would." Kurama remained silent and he decided to leave her alone for the time being as he continued speaking with Temari. Elsewhere in the village. I can't believe they closed the ice cream shop for today. This is a rare off day from training and I wanted some carrot ice cream. Yuga Hanabi grumbled as she walked briskly back to the Yuga compound with her escort behind her. I am sorry this happened, Lady Hanabi. We will be able to return another day however. The Yuga guard tried to appeal to his charge. A moody Hanabi never meant anything good for those around her. Only Naruto was able to cheer her up with ease and he wasn't around. Hanabi didn't say anything more as she continued to seethe. After they walked in silence for a moment, she heard a thud and a grunt. Next thing she knew, her guard's body fell forward beside her and it landed on the ground with a thump. She could see blood seeping down the man's forehead. In a panic, she spun around to see who caused this only to see two pairs of hands reaching for her. She didn't have time to scream for help when a man's rough hand clamped over her mouth tightly from behind. At the main gate 30 minutes later. Naruto and Temari arrived at the gate just before 5 o'clock. They found the Hokage and Kazekage standing by the guardhouse talking. The rest of the Suna party were loitering around outside the gate waiting to leave. Naruto noticed the Hokage had changed his outfit to a black traditional shinobi outfit, complete with a gray gauntlet on his right arm, sandals, and a white piece of fabric displaying the kanji for third Hokage covering his shoulders. His armored battle hood, adorned with his hit I-8, hung at his waist. The Kages turned to the children. Hello, Naruto-kun and Temari-san. How was your day? Rizuen greeted with a pleasant smile as Temari bowed to him. I had a good time. Thank you for having Naruto-san escort me, Hokage-sama. I'm glad to hear that. Naruto-kun can be a good boy when he's not being mischievous. Boy, Hokage Jiji, why are you wearing that outfit? Is there a battle going on? Naruto inquired innocently before being conked on the head by a slightly irritated third. I hope you have not forgotten your prank in which you hid all of my wardrobe and left me with nothing but a bright orange Hokage outfit. Unlike you with your jumpsuit, I refuse to be caught dead in public wearing that. I was forced to unseal my combat outfit just so I can see the Suna party off. He muttered grouchily with a twitching eyebrow. Temari had to giggle at what Naruto's prank turned out to be. Ooh. Sorry, I did forget he. Naruto chuckled nervously with his sheepish pose. The third just sighed, told Temari his goodbyes, and went back to finish up his conversation with an amused Kazekage. Temari and Naruto took a brief walk a small distance out the gate before facing each other. Hokage Jiji? Temari raised a quizzical eyebrow. Oh, he's sort of my grandfather figure. He takes care of me sometimes while I'm living by myself. Naruto clarified. She nodded with a gentle smile. Naruto-san, I just want to thank you for coming along and for listening to me. I'm sorry I dumped all of that on you. She bowed before a sheepish Naruto. It's not a big deal, really. I've had a tough life too, so I could understand some of what happened to you. I just hope you'll find a way to fix all of this. If not, then I'll do it instead if you want me to. He assured with a confident expression before blushing slightly and glancing away a little. Even though it was punishment, I'm happy I was your escort for the day. It was really nice. Temari blushed a little at her fellow blonde's kindness and sincerity. She decided it would not hurt if she kept in touch with him via letters. Naruto-san, I would like. She was interrupted by a Konoha Chunin suddenly appearing at the Hokage's side with an alarmed expression. I apologize, Hokage-sama, but you need to know that a Yuga main member has been abducted. We found her guard dead near their compound. We're not able to pinpoint who or where the suspects went, and all we know is that it's been about 30 minutes since she was taken. He reported urgently. The Hokage narrowed his eyes at the news, and everyone heard a snarl from Naruto. Temari was surprised when he suddenly left her side and sprinted up to the Chunin. Who was it? Who's been taken? The boy growled with an enraged expression that made everyone around him shiver. My youngest daughter Hanabi. A man's voice drew everyone's attention to a tall Yuga man approaching at a brisk pace with a girl at his side. Panic was evident on Hinata's face, while Hiashi was barely keeping a hold on his own emotions. There was another angry snarl from Naruto, and Temari assumed he knew whoever was kidnapped. The blonde boy then put on a calm but serious expression as he turned to the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I believe I can help find her quickly, but I need your permission. He addressed the older man, and Temari was surprised to see all trace of the cheerful and goofy boy she had been with most of the day gone. He was all business now. Hiruzen was surprised to say the least. His surrogate grandson had never addressed him like this before. What do you intend to do? You know I have my sense of smell. I know Hanabi-chan's scent, and my clones can smell it just as well as I do. I could use some of the power to bring up tons of them and send them out in all directions until one of them finds her scent. It'll dispel to let me know where, and I'll go full power to catch up with the kidnappers and try to slow them down until backup comes. Naruto was clearly hesitating to mention his hidden power, but he was determined. The Hokage had to admit that was the best plan. He was sure it would take too long to form an organized search party and pick up the trail before the kidnappers got out of their territory. However, it would mean the boy revealing his hidden Jinchuriki status to everyone nearby, including his friend Hinata. Naruto-kun, are you sure? Hanabi-chan is precious to me. I can't worry if people will hate me afterward when she's in danger, and I could have saved her. Naruto-san. Hiyashi's voice interjected. Naruto whipped his head toward Hiyashi, surprised that he was addressed as such by the clan head. Please do what you must to help rescue my beloved daughter. I will speak with Hinata about this in the meantime, and I will make sure she understands. Hiyashi bowed deeply at his hips. He wanted so badly to go with Naruto and hunt down the bastards that dared to take his daughter, but he had to remain behind as clan head and to protect Hinata in case there might be another attack. Hinata was stunned at her father's action and his faith in Naruto. It was as if he knew her friend had a hidden ability that could save her little sister. You have my permission. We're outside the barrier so the chakra from your release won't bother anyone inside the village. Do what you can and I will follow the trail you leave to back you up as quickly as I can. The Hokage allowed. Temari was watching all of this with growing restlessness. The way Naruto talked about his power. The way the Hokage and that Yuga man seemed to know he had a unique ability. Her sharp mind was beginning to connect the dots and she didn't like the answer. As if on cue, Naruto turned toward her and she flinched a little. Temari-san, I'm really sorry. I didn't want to scare you, but I have to do this. I hope you'll forgive me. He spoke regretfully as she was beginning to feel the world crash down around her. He then quickly dashed outside the gate to the middle of a large grassy meadow next to the road into and out of the village. He got down on all fours like an animal and bared his sharpening teeth as he concentrated on bringing out something from within. In the next moment, everyone saw the boy's eyes flash crimson and they felt a growing and terrible presence in the air. The horrid cracking sound startled most when a small crater instantly appeared under Naruto's form. The presence seemed to press down on everyone but the Hokage and Hiyashi as they seemed unfazed. Rasa widened his eyes in shock at this boy's hidden power. Hinata involuntarily clutched onto Hiyashi's clothes, startled by the sudden presence. She activated her Byakugan and gasped as she saw dark red chakra twirling throughout her friend's body. The Suna party fell to their knees at once, trembling before this unknown presence, which was worse than whatever they experienced from Shukaku. Temari was the worst off as this pressure reminded her exactly of Gaara's killing intent, only this one was even stronger. Her body trembled, her teeth clattered, and her eyes were wide with terror. She stumbled back onto her backside and was clumsily scrambling backward away from the terrible presence. It's impossible. Why did Naruto-san have to be like Gaara? This is a joke. Naruto seemed to have finished building up the chakra when he stood up. He formed a cross shape with his hands. Hajukage Bushin. He yelled at the top of his lungs and he was instantly enveloped in a massive smoke cloud popping out of thin air and covering the entire grassy meadow. The powerful presence in the air disappeared instantly at this point and everyone assumed this was apparently used to power this jutsu. The smoke cleared away to show an astonishing sight. There were clones of Naruto everywhere as far as anyone could see. There had to be thousands. There were even many of them sticking to the large perimeter wall bordering the grassy meadow with chakra in their feet since the meadow was simply overflowing. Okay, boys. When you find Hanabi-chan sent, dispel to let the rest of us know. After that, the rest of you converge toward where the trail was found. Follow it and try to slow down the kidnappers when you catch up until I get there. Go, the real Naruto yelled from within the group and all the clones jumped and scattered in all directions with a deafening roar of yes boss. A long moment of silence followed with no one saying anything. Naruto just stood still alone in the middle of the meadow, feeling a little vulnerable by himself for everyone to stare at him. He was growing afraid as he was readying himself for any negative reaction. Naruto-kun. A whisper carried into the still air. Everyone turned toward Hinata, her eyes were wide open in shock as she gingerly stepped up close to within 5 feet of her friend. She was the closest to him of anyone. What was that? She whispered again. Naruto glanced down, pain evident in his eyes. He let out a resigned sigh and looked up at her with a determined expression. That was me using the power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune sealed within me to help create these clones. He said evenly, his gaze set with Hinata's own as she gasped. Temari let out a quiet whimper upon hearing this, as she knew the Kyuubi was much stronger than Shukaku. And now I plan on using more in a minute to get stronger and faster, so I can use the speed boost it provides to catch up with the kidnappers as quickly as possible. I'm sorry I kept this from you for so long, Hinata-chan. Naruto's voice cracked as he was expecting Hinata to lash out at him in anger for holding the Kyuubi. But how? I thought the Kyuubi died years ago. Hinata's tone seemed to sound more curious than afraid, which surprised Naruto. He hopefully looked up at Hinata's concerned expression. There was no trace of fear or hatred. I'll answer that, Lady Hinata. There was no way any human could actually kill a Biju, so the fourth did the only thing he could do, which was to seal the demon into a newborn. The newborn that was used for the sealing stands before you. The reason you did not know that fact was because I created a law forbidding everyone in Konoha from openly talking about that on pain of death. So please do not blame Naruto-kun for not telling you. He was only following my recommendation. The Hokage spoke softly from next to Hiashi, who nodded in confirmation. Hinata widened her eyes before letting her bangs overshadow them. Naruto-kun, you. Naruto flinched as he was expecting his longtime friend to get angry with him any minute. He certainly wasn't prepared for her pouncing on him to wrap her arms around his neck. Now I understand everything. I know why the stupid villagers hate you. I'm so sorry you had to suffer, Naruto-kun. You have no idea how much of a relief it is for me to know why they hurt you and why you put up with it. She cried, her tears flowing as she imagined the pain her friend must have endured. Naruto was too stunned to hug her back as he felt happy tears flow down his cheeks. He told someone and she didn't hate him. Even better, she accepted him for who he was. After a long minute of sobbing, Hinata had to pull back and sniffled. We'll talk more. Please use everything to save my little sister. She's one of my precious people, too. She pleaded. Naruto smiled assuredly. I promise, Hinata-chan. And I never go back on my promises, you know that. He stated calmly. Hinata nodded and stepped back to the edge of the meadow to join her father at his side. Naruto-san, please be careful and thank you for doing this. The clan head added in. Naruto nodded his assertion. A trembling voice drew everyone's attention to Temari, whose expression was changing from terror to anger. Why do you trust him so much? He's just going to blow up and kill you all one day. She shouted as she tried to make sense of this whole thing. Jinchuriki weren't supposed to be this nice or self-sacrificing. Hinata's expression darkened at this unknown girl's tone. Why did you act nice to me? Was it to fool me for your own amusement before you decide to kill me? I'm not going to give you that satisfaction, and stay the hell away from me. She snarled hatefully at the blonde boy. She didn't want to believe there was another Gaara around her. She had enough of the nightmare she suffered with her own brother for so long. She immediately regretted what she said as she watched Naruto's expression shatter and his beautiful blue eyes dulled as he slowly looked down at the ground with a pained look. She could literally hear his heart breaking. At this point, it felt like she was doused with ice-cold water and she regained control over her emotions. For some reason, it hurt deeply now when she said these awful words out loud. She knew now that she let her trauma over Gaara's actions overtake her and she had gone too far. She thought about apologizing quickly, but that was forgotten when she heard an enraged yell and turned her head to see the indigo-haired girl rush at her with her hands posed to strike. She could see the veins around this girl's eyes bulging with rage. She absent-mindedly heard Naruto shout for his friend to stop, but it apparently fell on deaf ears. Temari couldn't react in time as Hinata struck out with a two-finger jab aimed directly at the bridge of her nose. The blonde closed her eyes to prepare for the pain, but it never came. After a few seconds of waiting, she slowly opened her eyes and was startled to see the striking hand trembling an inch from her face. Glancing up, it was obvious that the girl's father had caught up and grabbed her wrist to stop her advance. She felt some of the Suna escorts move up behind her, ready to take out their weapons to defend the Kazukige's daughter if they needed to. You will cease this, daughter. Now. Hiashi spoke firmly while Hinata strained against the grip. I will not, father. Her stupid ignorance hurt Naruto-kun. He did not deserve that. She snarled, pure rage evident in her voice. Hearing this person defend Naruto made Temari wish she took back her words as she remembered the brief time she spent with Naruto on the monument. Hiashi looked like he was going to have to get physical to stop his daughter. Hinata-chan. Stop this. Naruto's shout from where he stood seemed to have finally gotten through to Hinata as she stopped straining against her father's grip. You don't know what she's been through. She has reasons to fear me. He stated calmly and Temari felt even worse. The person she hurt deeply was defending her and she could see the hurt expression still on his face. She wanted to vomit and wallow in her own self-loathing. But Hinata tried. Leave her alone. She's about to leave, so let her go. We won't have to see her again, okay? He reasoned as he turned away. The statement's finality and the gesture felt like they punched an ice-cold hand into Temari's chest and squeezed her heart. Hinata seemed to have calmed down some, but she gave Temari one more angry glare. With a disgusted growl, she turned to walk with her father back next to the Hokage while the blonde girl slumped, staring down at the ground with watery eyes as she could not look up at Naruto anymore. Naruto briefly glanced at Temari slumped over on the ground and he could tell she regretted her recent outburst. He enjoyed his time with her, but he supposed her emotional scars at the hands of her brother were too great. It was best she didn't have anything to do with him anymore to avoid further stress for her. Though, hearing that from someone I just met today hurt worse than the worst insults from the villagers, some of whom I've seen all my life. I wonder why that is. He flinched as he got a memory from one of the clones. He could almost smell Hanabi's scent as if was here. One of my clones found her trail. It's northeast of here. It smells like there were 3 other people with her. From what I've seen from the clones' observations, they weren't very good at covering up their trail. He announced aloud, making most of the nearby people forget about what happened with Tamari. Land of hot water is in that direction. We do not have any treaty with that country, so if they make it in there, we cannot follow. They must be Chunin or even Genin if they're not covering up their tracks well, but it doesn't mean you can be careless though. Only engage if you know you have a shot. The Hokage advised. Naruto just nodded as he got down on all fours again and seemed to concentrate even harder. The powerful presence came back in full force and it was even stronger this time. However, everyone were expecting it and withstood the pressure better, with the exception of Tamari who still involuntarily trembled. Naruto's features turned positively feral with his enlarging whiskers, fangs showing past his lips, his fingernails extending into claws, and his eyes became more slatted with crimson slits now. The air around Naruto began to whip around into a frenzy everywhere, and a large amount of red chakra leaked out of the blonde's body. He threw his head up in a powerful roar, and even more chakra came out at once in an instant, causing a larger crater to form underneath him, with a brief tremor following. This forced everyone around him to take a step back at this awesome power. The chakra whipped around in random directions for a long moment before it began to compress around the boy's body to form what looked like a shroud, and it was shaped like a fox. Everyone could see a long chakra tail form, only to be joined by another one a moment later. Naruto let out a loud exhale as he directed his crimson eyes at Hinata, who was staring at him in obvious awe, before he spoke in a deep rumbling voice. Okay. I'll be going, everyone. I'll explain more later, Hinata-chan. Tamari-san. Tamari flinched at her name being called, and she still could not look him in the eyes. I'm sorry you had to see this. Good luck with your situation and I hope you'll be happy eventually. If you ever need help, the offer is still good. Take care and goodbye. Before she could try to say something, she was blown back like everyone else when Naruto disappeared in an explosive burst of speed, causing a gust of wind to whip out. Next thing she saw was a large trail of dust leading around Konoha's tall wall to the northeast as it disappeared into the distance. Hinata turned to wrap her arms around her father's waist as he patted her back. I hope you'll find her. We can't lose her, father. She trailed off and began to sniffle. He could only nod as they remained standing, not willing to move until Naruto returned. Hopefully with Hanabi. The third issued some orders to some arriving Anbu and turned to his winged counterpart. I am sorry you had to see a domestic issue just now. Unfortunately our goodbyes will need to be short since I'm taking a quick stroll into the forest to find the children. Goodbye and have a safe trip back to Suna, Rasa Dono. He briskly spoke as he put his armored hood on and then disappeared in a blur of speed after Naruto with a pair of Anbu escorts. The Kazekage narrowed his eyes as he walked up to his party and ordered them to make preparations to leave. He glanced over at Tamari, who was still sitting on the ground staring at the spot where Naruto was standing a moment ago, with large tears flowing down her cheeks. I'm sorry Tamari. It seems all I did when I brought you here was give you another bad memory. He turned his head toward where Naruto disappeared. But that boy, he is strong for his age. He might be able to beat my son in combat as he is. The meeting was successful as I managed to get them to redirect more of the Wind Daimyo's mission requests to us, so that should appease my people enough for a while, but there might still be some conflict later. I'll have to cease the council's pathetic assassination attempts on Gaara and then personally train him to at least match up to Konoha's own Jinchuriki. 15 minutes later in the forest. Naruto quickly came upon Hanabi's scent and was following it for the past 10 minutes. The landscape blurred by him at an insane velocity as he sped ahead on all fours through the thick forest. The longer he ran, the faster he seemed to go as his determination to find Hanabi continued to grow. He blurred by most of the clones that he created earlier as they loudly encouraged him to hurry the hell up and that they'd catch up soon. At this point, he began to get memories from the clones ahead of him when they finally engaged Hanabi's kidnappers. They were defeated easily, but the information from the memories were valuable. Naruto saw there were 3 men in Hanabi, like he deduced from the sense. 2 of the kidnappers were thin and lanky. The third, a large man, had Hanabi tied up and gagged, struggling valiantly under his arm. They were dressed in plain light blue shinobi outfits similar to what Kirinin wore. Naruto's suspicions were confirmed when one of the clones had a good look at their hit I-8, which each showed the insignia of Kurigakure with a scratch through it. The way they fought the clones clearly showed them to be around Chunin level in skills. That information along with their terrible skills at covering up their trails made Naruto wonder how they broke into Konoha and kidnapped Hanabi without anyone noticing. It's most likely an inside job. Kurama's comment nearly made him trip. What? It's the only way to explain how these imbeciles got past your village's barrier. They must have had help. Whoever did this is probably letting anyone with enough money by, and maybe that's also how Kumo found out details about you they should not have known. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the memory of his Ashi's death. He sometimes felt a small pang of guilt in the back of his head that if Kumo hadn't known so much about him, then it wouldn't have led to the political maneuvering which caused his Ashi's unnecessary death. I don't like the idea of someone betraying Konoha like that, but I'll have to bring this up with Hokage. If it was really true, then I'll gladly rip that son of a bitch into pieces. I certainly would like to see that. Back to the situation at hand, when you encounter them, go in fast and hard. Try to take one or two of them out at once, beginning with the one holding that child. You only have limited time before my chakra would begin to hurt your body. If anyone remains, try not to reveal all of your tricks at once. Try to keep one hidden until you lure them in and spring a trap. I understand, Kurama. With that, Naruto sped up just a bit more as he could feel the clock ticking down on his chakra mode. The scenery around him melted into one big green blur as he focused his heightened vision ahead into almost a tunnel vision. He could smell the scents of Hanabi and the kidnappers growing stronger as he got closer. Finally, his vision picked up a hint of light blue. On that cue, he slowed down and leapt up to a tree. He then sprang off toward another, repeating this silently until he landed on a limb when he had a clear view of the missing nin, especially the large man with Hanabi. They were clearly shaken by the sudden appearance of clones from everywhere and now by the large and terrible pressure of Kurama's chakra growing in the air around them. They did not see the blonde up in a tree in the distance winding his right arm back as if he was preparing to throw a ball. A few minutes earlier. Hanabi would not stop struggling and mumbling loudly through her gag as she showed angry defiance on her face, which was an odd reaction from a young girl towards the three scary-looking men who abducted her. She was bad at obeying orders, and that was before the clones suddenly showed up. She apparently recognized those clones and struggled even harder since then. The leader was getting fed up with the girl. He was glad that they would soon be dropping her off with their client at a meeting spot up ahead. He would just have to hold his patience until then. He just wished these pathetic clones weren't getting in their way and testing his patience so much just when they were so close to completing their mission. This blonde brat really was annoying. As they were hopping across tree branches, they were abruptly set upon by a wave of massive and terrible killing intent. It felt like it sliced cleanly through all of them from behind, and they all had to jump down to the ground to regain their senses. Even Hanabi went slack with fear in the large man's arm for a moment before she began to struggle again, although not as enthusiastically as before. Boy, what the hell was that? The large man whispered with fear clear in his tone. Stay alert. This has to be a Jinjutsu or something. No human could emit something like that. The leader barked, trying to keep his own nervousness back. Stupid, and I thought this was going to be an easy mission, especially with that guy letting us in and out of Konoha. Our client is just right there beyond here. The last member of the team spoke up nervously. They felt the presence grow, almost suffocating them until it finally stopped moving closer. For a moment, the team thought they might be able to walk away from this. That relative peace was shattered by the whoosh of a large red chakra arm, cutting through the air directly at the large man's face. Before the man could react, the open hand slammed into his head with a sickening crunch and pushed him back violently, making him drop Hanabi to the ground where he was standing. The chakra arm smashed the large man into a tree with such force that his skull crushed inward under the hand's grip and his spine snapped in two like a toothpick. He was already dead before he hit the ground. Naruto then had the hand latch onto the same tree and it quickly slung him out of the tree he was hiding in toward where Hanabi was on the ground. He landed, dissipated the chakra arm, and quickly grabbed her with his real right arm. Before the two remaining nin could snap out of their shock, he whipped his left arm out, extending another chakra claw toward the two remaining nin. The leader instinctively jumped out of the way, but the other nin wasn't so lucky. The red fist smashed into him hard and he was knocked backward into another tree, his head thumping against it with a sickening sound. Letting that red arm dissipate, Naruto then jumped backward before extending one of his tails toward a limb behind him to let it sling him and Hanabi backward high into the trees for cover. The last missing nin was too shocked to see his two comrades struck down so easily. He could not wrap his mind around the fact that the blonde brat wasn't normal and his anger overtook his rational thoughts. I'm going to kill that stupid brat. He growled as he disappeared into his own cover in the trees. As this was going on, Naruto tree hopped a little farther into the forest before setting Hanabi down on a tree branch. Figuring time was up with his chakra shroud, he let it dissolve to return to normal, and he was now panting slightly since that mode left him tired but still able. Hanabi was stunned and overwhelmed that her Ani-chan was the one who used a terrifying power, but she was glad it was him saving her. Facing her, Naruto put a finger to his lips to make sure she would be quiet. She frantically nodded with grateful eyes as he silently cut the rope with his sharpened fingernails and removed the gag. Hanabi quickly hugged him tightly around his neck and he could feel her trembling body as it racked with silent sobs. The boy narrowed his eyes in anger toward the nin for inflicting such a traumatic experience on this young girl. He leaned in to whisper as he gently pried her resisting arms off his neck. Hanabi-chan, we can't get away quietly, but we do have someone coming. I'm going to distract the last guy. I want you to sit tight with those two. Naruto indicated two clones that silently appeared behind Hanabi, surprising her slightly. And do not come out until you see me or the Hokage. Hanabi didn't want him to go by himself and she was going to insist, but Naruto immediately jumped down to the ground and disappeared out of view. She growled as she couldn't go after him thanks to the clone's grip on her. She could only hope he would be okay and activated her Byakugan to try to follow what was happening beyond her hiding spot. Growling as he dispelled another clone that came out of hiding from the dense foliage around him with his kunai, the missing nin was getting angrier by the minute. Just how long was this brat going to keep sending those clones at him? And just how much chakra did he have? These clones were coming from everywhere and they seemed to be growing in number each passing minute. All of a sudden, everything fell silent around him. The nin did not hear any more rustling of leaves and not even any of this forest's animals. A cold sweat dripped down the man's neck as he concentrated on searching for any sign of danger. Before he could think further on this, the bush in front of him exploded outward to spit out the blonde kid who slashed a clawed hand at his face. Fortunately for him, he was prepared as he ducked under the strike and tried to lash out with his kunai while the boy was still in the air. However, he was intercepted when a clone appeared from his side and kicked the stabbing arm off course, missing the first one by inches. He now knew the one in front of him was the original if another copy had to save him. This sent him into an excited frenzy. Naruto, upon landing from his missed strike, snarled and dashed in close to get under another one of this nin's deadly swipes and lashed a leg out to kick at one of this man's knees. Unfortunately for Naruto, the nin was resilient and the knee took the strike without breaking, like he had hoped. He cursed being a child, even though he had grown much stronger, he was still no match for an adult's full strength. The full swing kick caught him in the stomach and he was punted away. Grunting in slight pain as he recovered midair, he spun and let his momentum carry him to a nearby tree. He slammed against it with all of his limbs latching on with chakra. The nin was momentarily surprised at his quick recovery, and that was all the blonde needed as he launched off the trunk at a surprising speed toward his enemy with an outstretched hand, its fingernails sharpening into claws. The nin was too surprised to see the blonde kid recover unexpectedly that he wasn't prepared for the retaliation when sharp claws slashed diagonally across his face. A few seconds later, he was screaming in rage and pain as he clutched at his face with a hand. That left his stomach defenseless, which Naruto took advantage of when he dashed and leapt into a full-force double drop kick that managed to launch the man back to slam against a tree. The man still wouldn't go down as he began to blindly flail around with the kunai in his hand, hoping to catch a piece of the blonde even in his blinded state. Naruto effortlessly dodged each swipe as he moved closer to the man, now nothing more than an injured rabbit trying to stave off death against a fox. A lucky swipe would have cut Naruto in the neck if he hadn't grabbed the wrist just before it connected. The nin gasped as the boy kept a firm grip on the wrist before he jumped toward a tree, dragging the disoriented man along. He bounced off and spun in midair toward another nearby tree, still keeping a firm grip. The nin cried out in discomfort as his arm was being twisted to nearly its breaking point. Upon reaching the second tree, he shot toward the ground, making the overextended man spin around and fall off his feet easily. Landing, Naruto let out a roar of exertion as he pulled the still falling and disorientated man from behind to sling him forward at high speed toward yet another tree. The nin smashed into the tree with a cry of pain and almost broke it in two. Somehow, the older man stayed conscious, but he was in so much pain he couldn't move anything. Realization came to the blonde. I think I'm starting to understand why you've been making me practice the grappling and throwing kata of Raging Fox more than the others. I'm impressed you caught on already in your first life or death battle. I predicted that if you faced any threat at this point in your life, it would be against someone adult-sized. Even with your increased strength and speed, the size difference would be too great to make effective use of the striking kata in most cases. Good job on quickly eliminating those three. Now, I think you have some questions for this one. Who sent you? Naruto growled as he stepped up to the barely conscious man. It took the nin all his effort to perk his head up to glare balefully at the boy through his ruined face. Naruto wasn't fazed. It's obvious you're the grunts. There's someone else who wants my friend. I want to know who that is. Also, who helped you break into Konoha? Stupid you. The nin forced out, his heated gaze still set on Naruto's ice-cold gaze. The boy shrugged. Alright, I was trying to help you. The Hokage is coming any minute and the first thing he will do is send you to interrogation since he will be very particularly interested in the breach in Konoha's defenses. I have heard horror stories about the head of interrogation and he'll make my kicking all of your asses seem like a pleasant dream in comparison. If I told the Hokage you offered information, I could put in a good word and it'll make your stay somewhat more pleasant. Don't give a stupid. Just kill me. Suit yourself. The blonde backed away a few steps and stood there to wait for the Hokage as the man seemed to have fallen into unconsciousness. Too bad I can't use your chakra for now. It'd probably scare him shitless. We'll just have to let the old fart loosen this one's tongue. I wonder why we never covered torture methods. Maybe I'll add that to our lessons. That sounds unappealing. I don't think I have the looks to pull off a menacing interrogator anyway. On the contrary, I think seeing your disarming smile and innocent blue eyes while you slowly pull a man's entrails out through his anus might make him want to give up every single detail ever since he was born. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You think I have a great smile? He grinned upon hearing the fox face fault in his head. I would think you would be more alarmed by the other half of my previous statement. I was kind of expecting a Tsukomi to that one. Sorry to disappoint, my friend. I'm already used to you. Kurama snorted at his cheekiness and they fell into silence as he waited for any backup. After a minute, Naruto twitched as he heard rustling in the bush nearby. Upon smelling the scent, he sighed as Hanabi burst out of the leaves. What happened to my clones? He irritably asked the sheepish girl. I lost them when I had to pee. She lied badly. After a hard look from Naruto, she broke down. Alright. I saw you beat this guy so I got free with my Jukin. I figured it'd be okay if I came to you now, Ani-chan. Doesn't matter. If I tell you to stay, you stay. At least listen. Naruto stopped suddenly as he heard the very slightest bit of noise. He grabbed the surprised Hanabi and jumped away. Looking back, he saw several kunai striking the ground where he was standing. He then heard a wet thunk and looked over to the disabled missing nin to see a kunai buried deep into one of the man's eye sockets. He was already dead. Naruto continued to evade more kunai and shuriken as he carried the shocked Yuga in his arms through some trees. Running into a small clearing, he came face to face with a new enemy. He growled. So Akumo bastard is behind this. He snarled, clutching Hanabi tightly in his arms. Standing before him was a middle-aged man with short graying brown hair. He was dressed in a typical Kumo jounin outfit with a pair of black pants and a black shirt underneath the Kumo's over-the-shoulder flak vest. One of his gray eyes was covered by an eye patch. The Kumo Hitai 8 was displayed proudly on his forehead. I'm temporarily an ex-Kumo, but that will change when I come back with that girl. You may have beaten the missing nins, but I'm a whole different story. You fought bravely, so I will let you go if you give me the girl now. The Kumo jounin emotionlessly stated as if everything he said was a matter of fact. You mean to tell me they never sent you and you're just trying to bribe your way back in with my friend here on the off chance they'd accept this? Maybe I should assume they won't miss you if I kill you right now for even suggesting that in front of me. Naruto spoke evenly with such coldness it made Hanabi shiver and even sent a small chill down the jounin's spine. The older man narrowed his eyes. I guess the negotiations have broken down already. You could say that, and here comes my official rejection. The forest surrounding the clearing erupted with loud war cries as countless clones of Naruto leapt out of the trees into the air to drop down on the jounin. Temporarily surprised, he allowed the first few clones to get close to hitting him. He saw Naruto and Hanabi run off into the forest while the clones were doing their best to keep him busy. Son of a bitch. I didn't think he had a jutsu like that. I'll have to get serious. He quickly rushed through some hand seals before shouting. Raiden. Shockwave. The large dome of lightning expanded outward from the jounin, shocking and dispelling every clone that converged on him. The dome continued to expand until it barely reached the retreating original inside the forest. He grunted loudly in pain as he felt his legs seize up when a tendril of electricity from the fading dome licked against them. He fell forward, dropping Hanabi, who yelped in surprise, and rolled to a stop a short distance away. Thinking quickly, he formed the hand sign for the clone jutsu, and 3 clones popped into existence between him and Hanabi. You two, take Hanabi-chan and go. You, transform into her. No. Ani-chan. Hanabi cried and struggled as 2 of the clones grabbed her, making sure to silence her and lock her hands up tightly so she wouldn't use her Jukin to dispel them, and they then quickly ran off. It broke his heart to look into Hanabi's desperate eyes, begging for him to run too as they faded into the dense vegetation. He saw the 3rd clone transform into Hanabi and lay on the ground next to him, breathing heavily and twitching as if she was struck by the lightning dome too. I'd pat myself on the back for such an awesome acting job, but no time for that. It looks like we have no choice. When you see a chance, I'll pump my chakra into you quickly. It'll damage your body since you've used up your limit for the day, but better that than both of us dead. I'll heal you afterward anyway. Looking forward to that. Not. He flipped himself over and raised himself up on his elbows, with his legs still seizing up, to see the Kumonin approaching him and Hanabi. You almost made things a little difficult for me for a second. I hope you have seen the difference between the Kiri trash and a Jounin from Kumo. I offered you a chance, but you blew it. I'll make your death quick, at least. The Jounin emotionlessly stated as he walked up close to Hanabi. She whimpered and cried as she desperately tried to crawl away. Damn, I could run a world-class theater troupe all by myself if I ever had to give up being a shinobi. I almost want to save this girl myself out of instinct. Focus, Naruto. As the Jounin was reaching for Hanabi, she suddenly smirked evilly as her eyes turned wild. The Jounin was a little taken aback at this sudden display, but before he could think more on this, Hanabi popped into smoke to reveal that she was one of Naruto's clones. It quickly leaped toward the nin with both clawed hands aiming for his neck. The man recovered quickly enough to slam a fist into its face hard, dispelling it. You damn brat. You managed to distract me long enough to get the real one away. I take back what I said, your death will be slow. The Jounin growled slightly as he turned toward Naruto with cold fury in his eyes. Now's a good time as any, Kurama. You'll be surprised at how difficult I can be. To kill. Naruto's voice turned demonic at the end as he felt Kurama's chakra envelop his body into a two-tail shroud. True to Kurama's words, he immediately felt burning pain spreading throughout his body and he had to grimace, though at least he regained control of his legs. The transformation had the desired effect on the Jounin, however, as he was wide-eyed in terror. What the hell? You're the cause of that presence I felt not too long ago. He bellowed as he took a defensive position with a kunai in reverse grip. Got to admit he's got enough balls to stand against your killing intent head-on. Unfortunately, that's a bad thing for us. Got to at least try and get the jump on him anyway. While he's focused on avoiding us, we'll run away. Naruto suddenly disappeared in a blur of speed. In the next instant, he was up on a tree trunk behind the Jounin and bounced off to try to slash him with his claws from the blind spot. The Jounin was too experienced as he dodged the swipe by a hair's width. This did not deter Naruto as he bounced up to another tree trunk and shot off to attempt a flying kick at the Jounin's head from another angle. The boy was shocked as the Kumo effortlessly moved in under the kick and countered with a kunai swipe at his face. He had to twist the body to its trained limits to barely avoid the kunai, leaving only a cut on his forehead as he flew underneath the kunai strike. Too close. Get the stupid out of there. Not arguing with that, he quickly jumped onto another tree and seemed to prepare for another attack, but instead the boy bounced to another tree farther away and jumped up to start tree hopping through the forest. The Jounin was a little surprised at this sudden change and grunted in frustration. He thought about just giving this up, but he'd be damned if he let a brat barely out of his diapers show him up. With that, the man also jumped up into the trees, easily keeping pace. Here's hoping he's not interested in chazzing. I wouldn't bet on that. Keep going. Yes ma'am. What the? Naruto's body suddenly became numb and he realized he couldn't move much anymore. The chakra shroud suddenly dissipated and he felt even weaker. The worst thing was that he was still 50 feet above ground and he was about to lose all control of his body. Desperate, he aimed to jump down from a limb for some branches running down a tree trunk that should slow his descent. On that cue, his entire body failed and he spun forward in a free fall. He grunted as his back hit the first branch, but it did the job. It slowed him down before he hit the next one, and it repeated several times until the battered Naruto landed on his back with a soft thud on the earth. A grunt of pain escaped his mouth. Ow, so that's what happens when I use the chakra too much. That's very helpful to know, and I'll be filing that away for future reference. No need for the sarcasm. I'll work on healing your body as fast as I can. It'll be about 5 minutes before you can move well enough though. Now, we just have to hope the Kumo-nin doesn't show up. The Kumo Jounin landed with a soft thump on the ground some distance away from Naruto, with a victorious smile spreading across his face. You just had to jinx it, damn fox. It's been nice working with you on this short partnership, damn brat. It looks like whatever you did left you weak in the end. I lost my chance at getting back into Kumo, but at least I'll get my revenge. The Jounin chuckled as he brandished his kunai. The boy just glared at him, not willing to beg for his life. Instead, he awaited his fate with no fear in his eyes. What he didn't expect was to hear a wet thunk and a yelp of pain. There was a lightning-infused shuriken sticking deep into the Jounin's now spasming forearm, forcing him to drop the kunai. Gasping, the man glanced around to see where the shuriken came from and widened his eyes in terror. Naruto turned his head with some effort to see what got the Jounin so scared. Peering into the light of the setting sun, he noticed the sunlight seemed to be fading slowly as if something was blotting it out. He was flabbergasted to see an enormous hail of shuriken, at least several hundred thousands of them, flying through the air to be the cause. He didn't notice the panicking Jounin trying to escape by shunshin. Failing that, the man tried Kawarimi only to find no success there either. He realized too late that the lightning-infused shuriken stuck deep into his forearm was disputing his chakra network, making it impossible for him to escape via chakra at the moment. The size of the shuriken hail was too large and wide for him to physically escape safely now. In a whistling roar, all the shuriken passed over Naruto's immobile body to strike the jounin, who instinctively had his arms up in front of his face, all over his body. The rest landed in a wide area around the man. The grouping was so tight that there was no more than half an inch's gap between each individual metal star. Naruto had to wince upon seeing the nin covered from head to toe with shuriken on every inch of his body. The jounin let his shuriken-riddled arms flop down weakly to show an intact face, but with blood running freely out of his mouth. After letting out a bloody cough, he slowly fell backward into a sitting position against a tree. Most of the shuriken then puffed into a large cloud of smoke. After it cleared, Naruto saw there were only 3 real shuriken sticking into the man's body, but the rest still left behind actual holes, as evidenced by the profuse bleeding and the ground underneath the body getting soaked quickly with a dark red fluid. He looked back toward where the shuriken came from to see a lone black figure with 2 long ribbons of cloth whipping behind the figure's hooded head in the wind. A long bow staff was seen in his hand. He was relieved when the figure got closer to reveal Sarutobi Hiruzen in full combat outfit with a concerned expression on his face as he looked at the immobile boy. "Naruto-kun, are you okay? Fox is fixing me up. I'll be up and running in a little. You find Hanabi-chan?" "Yes. My escorts are keeping her busy nearby since she does not need to see this. You should look away now if you do not want to watch the rest of this." Hiruzen hardened his gaze and voice as he glanced over at the barely conscious Kumo jounin. He walked over to the body, brandishing his bow staff slightly. Naruto decided to watch this. Ace Mugen, the living lightning, also a disgraced ex-jounin of Kumagakure. You have been recently listed in the bingo book as an A-rank missing nin for crimes committed on your former village, with a specific request from the Raikage himself to kill you on sight. What are your final words before I execute you on this spot? Mugen let out a wet cough as more blood spilled out of his mouth. He barely shrugged with a resigned smirk. There were no fear in his eyes even before the powerful Hokage. What can I say? It's been a good life. In the next instant, there was a thunderous whoosh of air as the god of shinobi sliced the Kumo jounin's head off with a simple flick of his wrist, holding the bow staff. The head thumped and rolled across the forest floor with Naruto's eyes following it in awe. Holy Hokage Jiji just made a clean cut with a freaking bow staff. No surprise there, his clan has always been known for its mastery of the staff. Hiruzen sealed his staff into a seal on his wrist before he used hand seals and inhaled a large amount of air. "Pain. Gakakyu," he whispered before expelling hot flames, engulfing the headless body until it turned into ashes. Taking out a scroll, he walked over and knelt next to the severed head. Naruto grimaced at the grisly sight as the Hokage laid it out next to the head and slapped a hand on a seal array. In a puff of smoke, the head was now sealed into the scroll. "Since you took down 3 C-ranked missing nins and assisted in taking down an A-ranked one, I suspect you will see a much fatter envelope in the office lockbox on your next allowance day. You just won't be credited since you are not a shinobi yet, so I hope you don't mind. I suggest saving that for your eventual sabers," the third suggested with a smile. Naruto had to grin at some good fortune coming out of a long day of shitty luck. A moment later, some feelings finally returned to his body and he was able to get up and walk under his own power. He and the third then began walking through the forest back toward their village. They only went 100 meters before a loud shriek shook the air. "Ani-chan." Oof. A small black blur zoomed out of some foliage to plow into Naruto's stomach. He fell backward onto the ground with Hanabi hugging him as tight as she could around his stomach, crying out loud. "You have no idea how scared I was for you. Don't ever force me to leave you to your death again. I don't ever want to tell Ni-chan you died for me. I can't take that. Please don't ever make me feel like this again." She continued to ramble and cry as she repeatedly slapped her hands weakly against his chest. Naruto allowed a guilty grimace as he hugged her tightly, making her stop the feeble assault and break down into racking sobs as he softly patted her back with whispered apologies into her ear. The Hokage calmly stood aside and allowed the two to have their moment while a pair of slightly frazzled Anbu emerged from the foliage Hanabi came from. Apparently they had their hands full keeping a very worried Yuga Eris occupied. After a few minutes of crying, the excitement and the emotional turmoil of the attempted kidnapping got up with Hanabi and she quickly fell asleep in Naruto's arms. Hoisting her sleeping form onto his back and draping his orange jacket over her, he and the others began making their way back to Konoha. Some time later approaching the main gate. "And that's why the fox and I think there might be a breach in Konoha's defenses. Just thought I'd tell you my opinion." Naruto explained what he and Kurama spoke about earlier. Hiruzen was nodding grimly. He had some suspicions, and this incident only served to fuel that. He would have to investigate deeply for this traitor. He waved his hand, and the two Anbu escorting them moved forward immediately. "You have heard, Naruto-kun. Please run on ahead and get started investigating about a possible breach in our defenses. I'll be fine on my own from here onward," he said quietly and got a pair of affirmative nods before they disappeared instantly into blurs toward the main gate of Konoha looming close. He then let out a loud yawn and a stretch. I'm getting so old that I need to give my old bones some rest after this light stroll in the forest," he grumbled while thumping a fist against his lower back. Naruto glanced over with a deadpan expression. "You just sliced a man's head off with a flick of your wrist using a friggin' bow staff, and you're complaining about being old. That was impressive to you? It's child's play to me." The old man spoke with feigned haughtiness. Naruto chuckled before turning serious. "So that was a glimpse of what it's like to be a shinobi outside this gate." The Hokage adopted a serious expression as he gazed down at his surrogate grandson. "How does it feel, Naruto-kun?" The blonde raised one of his hands to stare at the palm as he repeatedly flexed it. "I killed that big man brutally and mercilessly. I could hear every single piece of his skull cracking under my chakra claw's grip, and I could hear the loud pop of his spine snapping and two against that tree. All I could think of was to get Hanabi-chan away from that man in the quickest and most efficient way, but I still took a life in the process. The other two died as results of my actions too. I'm not going to enjoy killing, that's for sure." The Hokage remained silent. But seeing Hanabi-chan so happy to have been saved took a lot of that sting away. "I can honestly believe I will do whatever I have to keep innocent people safe from harm and be happy they were okay because of me. So I'm still not changing my mind about being a Konohinin." His grandfather figure nodded with a gentle smile. "As long as you keep that in mind, I think you will be quite a fine shinobi, Naruto-kun. After seeing what you did to save this young lady, I have no doubt you can handle yourself. Looks like you have a welcoming committee." Naruto glanced ahead to see Hiashi and Hinata standing at the guardhouse, as if they've never left the spot when he ran off after Hanabi. There were also a small group of other Yugas nearby, including the heiress's worried caretaker, Tomo. They finally glimpsed the rescue party approaching, and they noticed Hanabi sleeping safe and sound on Naruto's back. With twin cries of joy, Tomo and Hinata suddenly sprinted forward up to Naruto with obvious tears of relief flowing down their cheeks. Hinata quickly grabbed Naruto into a hug, while a cooing Tomo carefully lifted Hanabi off his back to hug her as tightly as she could without waking her. As the blonde listened to their quiet chants of thank yous, a relieved Hiashi stepped up next and bowed deeply. "It seems once again we fall further into our debt of gratitude to you, Naruto-san." Naruto just chuckled nervously with his sheepish gesture. "To be honest, Hiashi-sama, I'd be happy if Yuga girls would stop getting kidnapped around me. We'd be even on that," he teased with a foxy smirk. Hinata blushed slightly upon being reminded of her own kidnapping. The third and Tomo chuckled at Hinata's reaction, while Hiashi nodded with an amused smirk. 3 days later in Sunagakur. Temari finally arrived back at the Sabaku mansion, letting herself in. One could tell her eyes were a little red and puffy from some crying she did on the trip back here. Walking by the living room, she noticed Gaara sitting at the same bay window as before. She felt a shiver down her back and was about to leave him in silence without any acknowledgement. However, for some reason, she felt compelled to say this. "I'm back, Gaara," she whispered before continuing on past the doorway. If she had remained there for a few more seconds, she might have imagined it when Gaara whispered welcome back. Walking by Kankuro's room, she lightly tapped on the door as she stepped past and called out nonchalantly. "I'm back." She would have continued on if she wasn't stopped by the sound of Kankuro getting up and walking to the door to open it slightly. She looked around to see her brother's surprisingly unpainted face sticking out through the opening. "Nissan," he trailed off as he looked down slightly. Temari remained patient. "Thank you." She raised an eyebrow in surprise. "For trying to protect me from Gaara. I heard." He then closed the door before Temari could reply. After staring at the door for a moment, she allowed a small grin as she continued to her room. Arriving in her room, she flopped down on her bed and stared up at the ceiling. She went over what she saw in Konohagakure once more, and she knew now she stupid it up big time. She blew a chance to make friends with someone who could understand some of her pain and possibly help Gaara with his own issues as well. She knew the fault laid completely with her as she let her trauma overtake her so easily. Letting a small tear sting one of her eyes, she wiped it away before she risked breaking down into another crying fit. Sitting up, she glanced over at her collection of knitted dolls on her large dresser. Getting up, she removed her new weasel doll from her pouch and gently propped it up against the rest of the dolls, the collection growing by one. She smiled again at the memory of the kind and funny blonde boy in the orange jumpsuit who helped her shop for this. Having an idea, she sat down at her desk and proceeded to take out her knitting needles. Searching through a neat arrangement of yarns in the nearby chest, she found what she was looking for. A bright orange ball of yarn. Amic. Alternate take. Naruto opened his mouth and looked like he was about to persuade her otherwise, but slumped his head dejectedly. I guess it's for the best. Sorry we could not do anything today, Temari-san. I'm betting if I try to suggest another place, it'll explode into a massive fireball just to spite the hell out of me. It just isn't my day. He grumbled grouchily while Temari was hiding her amusement at this. Suddenly, he had a glint in his blue eyes and abruptly pointed at a random shop, which turned out to be a simple woodcraft shop. There. That one's open, so let's check it out. He said quickly. Temari was about to laugh out loud at her escort's antics when the shop Naruto was pointing at exploded into a large fireball that blew them back a step. The duo were stunned as they watched the store go up in flame and people around them were running around in panic. What just happened? It just exploded. Could it be a gas main? There's nothing like that near here. An enemy attack. Temari and Naruto watched all this calmly with blank faces for a long moment before they glanced at each other and nodded silently, agreeing to keep the real cause a secret. They then took several steps back while making sure no one noticed them before abruptly turning back to the night after the kidnapping attempt. Yuga compound. Thank you. Hinata whispered with a serene expression as she slowly combed fingers through Hanabi's long and silky black hair with her left hand. The younger Yuga curled up further into a ball as she snored gently, resting her head on her older sister's lap like it was a pillow. The two girls were on the living room couch and Naruto was sitting in one of the chairs across from them. You've already thanked me hundreds of times this night, Hinata-chan. The boy teased with an amused smile, not at all irritated with the girl's constant gratitude. Yes, but she's my precious little sister and she's one of the few reminders I have left of our mother. I'd be crushed if we did lose her, she trailed off as she raked her hand gently through Hanabi's hair again. The little Yuga looked like she would begin purring any moment. Naruto felt a pang in his chest as he remembered Hinata tearfully reminiscing about her deceased mother when she decided to open up about that not too long ago. He knew she would not have been able to recover from this if he had failed. Naruto-kun, father told me some details about your Hinata trailed off as she seemed to think about what would be an appropriate word. Naruto knew immediately she was talking about Kurama. Lieutenant, you mean? She flinched and slowly nodded as she was uncomfortable about bringing this up. I don't mind answering any question you may have about my situation. Naruto headed off her growing nervousness over the subject. She seemed to visibly relax at her friend's words. Was the Kyuubi the one who taught you all you've learned lately? She quickly got out and the blonde raised an impressed eyebrow. That's correct, but I'm surprised you figured that out. Well, no matter how hard I tried, I could never seem to find information on the sensei you keep mentioning and you were secretive whenever I asked you directly. It wasn't hard to figure out after you had to reveal everything tonight. Not everything yet. Sorry, but my parentage will have to wait for another day. That's pretty perceptive of you. Anything else? No, I would like to say something before we continue. Are you able to talk with the Kyuubi? Hinata inquired nervously. Naruto nodded. I would like for you to relay to her that I want to sincerely express my gratitude for training you up until now. Otherwise, who knows if my little sister could have been saved. She spoke firmly as she gazed directly into his eyes, her lavender-tinted eyes never wavering. I appreciate the gratitude, little girl. Kurama mumbled lazily as she was napping on a soft patch of grass in Naruto's mindscape. She says you're welcome. Naruto relayed the message. Hinata smiled happily and nodded. Does anyone else know about her? Pretty much anyone that's not around our age. Only Hokage and a few high-ranking shinobi know the more intimate details, especially the fact that I'm getting lessons from the fox. The rest just know she was sealed into me. Why were we not allowed to know? Like Hokage told you earlier, he made a law forbidding the villagers from talking about it so they wouldn't pass the information down to my generation with hopes that I might have a somewhat normal childhood growing up. Aside from my few friends, it's not working out well since everyone can just warn their children to avoid me without explaining the reasons why. Hinata frowned. I don't like that. Everyone should be able to see you for who you truly are. A kind and courageous person. Even the Kyuubi doesn't sound as evil as the stories made her out to be. Do they even know the fox was actually female? I'm not trying to rationalize this, but they lost a lot of people that night, including the fourth Hokage. It was easier for them to think I'm the fox reincarnated and take it out on me when they had nothing else to vent at. It's slowly going away each day, though. Lately a good portion of the shinobi force don't seem to mind me, and it's just the civilians who won't move past this. Still, I refuse to accept them trying to hurt you, Naruto-kun. Hinata glowered at her memories of the villagers cursing and glaring at him whenever they went out on walks. Hinata-chan, I want you to promise me something. Naruto said almost sternly to his friend, who narrowed her eyes defiantly. She could guess what this was. You need to let this go. Act the same as you always did while with me out in the village and leave them alone, okay? But. You let your anger overtake you and tried to attack Tamari-san when she reacted badly. If you hadn't been stopped by Hiyashi-sama, you might have been hurt if the Suna escorts retaliated against you for harming the Kazukiya's daughter. Then I'd have gotten angry and attacked them in return. Who knows what that might have led to. Naruto said bluntly with a hard look, making Hinata shrink under his gaze, as she truly realized what she nearly did. I tried to hit Akage's daughter. That's why I want you to leave this alone. There are consequences in reacting like that, and it'll hurt me if you got into trouble on my behalf. Just be satisfied with the fact that I'm happy with the friends I already have, and I don't need the entire village's approval. There is no need to force others into accepting that I'm not really the Kyuubi. They'll learn that on their own with time. Okay, I promise. I'm sorry. Hinata mumbled, clearly shaken by the fact she could have caused an international incident just because of her rage. It's no big deal. Actually, it made me a little happy you would be protective like that. Just be careful next time. Naruto said with a smile. Hinata, still feeling a little ashamed, could only nod silently with a downcast expression. After a long moment of silence, she moved her gaze down to her sleeping sister, looking a little shy about what she was going to say. Naruto-kun, would it be okay if you sit by me and I'll let me rest my head on you? She mumbled, hating her stuttering at a time like this. Naruto raised his eyebrows at a request. I don't mind, but why? You just fall asleep and I'm sure your dad is probably expecting me to head home soon. Naruto bowed his head slightly in confusion with that fox-like expression she always loved, making her almost lose her train of thought, but she persevered. Father would be fine with you staying the night and it's already early morning. I almost lost my little sister and right now I don't feel like it's safe yet. But having you near me makes me feel safe and calm. Is it okay? Naruto took a moment to think and then shrugged as he stood up from the chair. Sure, if that's what you'd like, Hinata-chan. I'm pretty sure your dad or Hokage are safer to be around, though, since they're stronger. He spoke as he moved to the couch, flopped down next to Hinata's right, and put his left arm up around her shoulders to make it more comfortable for her. It only took Hinata a few seconds of hesitation before she carefully rested her head on his chest and snuggled up with a big grin. No, Naruto-kun, you're a million times better than father or Hokage-sama. I can't imagine feeling this safe and warm with anyone else. Hinata enjoyed Naruto's slow heartbeat and the rising of his chest with each breath while she continued to absent-mindedly comb through Hanabi's hair. It was not long before she noticed Naruto's heartbeat and breathing were slowing down and becoming even. He's falling asleep. Hinata carefully removed her head a little so she could look up to see Naruto resting his head against the couch's back cushion and his eyes were closed. Hinata smiled a little mischievously and slowly leaned in to leave a very slight peck on his left cheek. She blushed a little and giggled quietly when Naruto mumbled a little and his cheeks became a little pink. The Yuga era slowly returned her head to his chest and closed her eyes shortly after. A while later, Yuga Hiyashi quietly stepped into the living room, finally done with the mess caused by his youngest daughter's attempted kidnapping. He noticed the slumbering trio on the sofa and allowed a genuine smile at their gentle expressions. He picked up 2 blankets nearby and carefully draped one over Hanabi and the other over the sleeping couple. Hinata has finally convinced you to stay the night, it seems. I never set up any rule about that and yet you were too polite to notice I did not care. I am a little envious of you though, Naruto-san. Hinata never displayed that kind of expression sleeping near me. Hiyashi thought as he glanced at his daughter's sleeping face, one that showed extreme contentment in knowing no harm would ever come to her and her sister as long as Naruto was nearby. He smiled again and quietly stepped away to retire to his bedroom. The next morning in Hokage's office. This scroll contains all the information Inoichi-san gathered from the Kumo missing nin's brain. He was able to collect some valuable information about some of the techniques this nin used, but we couldn't find anything important about Kumagakure that our spies' reports did not cover, however. Anbu Captain Hada Kakashi drawled as he laid a scroll on the desk across from the third Hokage, who nodded in understanding. The aged leader was happy that Yamanaka Inoichi had the ability to scan through a deceased person's brain, as long the neural pathways weren't damaged or did not deteriorate too much yet. And does he know anything about the breach in our barrier? Unfortunately, he really was just a client in this one. He only requested and paid the Kiri missing nin to get him a pure Yuga. Only they knew the way in. The Hokage sighed in frustration at that. And we cannot recover anything from the other men's brains. No sir. Naruto really did a number on the ones he killed and their brains were too damaged. He did try to leave the third, the leader, alive for us to interrogate, but the kunai from the Kumo nin penetrated too far into his brain. I suspect rumors that other villages trained their shinobi to aim for the heads of captives or informants with risky information the Yamanakas could exploit are becoming more legitimate each day. Hiruzen frowned at that. There have been a small decline in information they were able to gather from dead bodies because of an increase in head traumas. He hoped there wasn't a deliberate cause, but this latest incident was too hard to ignore. Keep up the investigation on this traitor. We need to figure out how they came in and left, and we should be able to follow the trail after that. And what do we do about the remains? Go ahead and collect the bounties, then give the money to me. Too bad we won't see the Raikage's reaction. You may go, Captain. Kakashi could be seen visibly grinning behind his face mask. It was a good thing for any village that a missing nin was returned quickly. But not too quickly. It was a blow to any village's pride if one of its top missing nin came back in a scroll a few weeks after being listed in the bingo book. That might imply to the other villages that this supposedly powerful nin was actually weak and the village trained weak shinobi. Kakashi bowed his head and vanished in a poof of smoke with a shunshin. A moment later, Naruto knocked on and entered through the office door. Good morning, Hokage Jiji. He called out as he stepped up to the desk. The third smiled at his surrogate grandson's arrival. Good morning, Naruto-kun. Good timing since I was about to send for you. Oh, want me to go over exactly what happened yesterday? I figured you'd call me for that. The third nodded and prepared a scroll and pen before gesturing for the boy to begin. The blonde then recounted everything that happened. 30 minutes later. And that's when you came in and kicked ass. The boy finished with a flourish. The Hokage chuckled as he put down the pen. You did great. There were moments where you faced death and a normal child your age would have frozen up and been unable to do anything, yet you kept finding ways out of the situations you were in. I am sorry we had to let you put yourself in danger like that. If only we were more prepared. He trailed off with his gaze slightly downcast. Don't worry. If I didn't think I could, I wouldn't have done it. Hiruzen smiled and nodded at this confident reassurance before remembering something. How did Lady Hinata take the revelation about you? She's perfectly fine with it. She didn't care because she knows I really am Uzumaki Naruto, not the fox. Good. This time your transformation didn't frighten the villagers because the detection barrier also protects against intrusion of foreign chakra in case someone attempted a mass genjutsu on the whole village. It was a bonus it blocked out the Kyuubi's chakra as well. I'm just sorry I could not prevent the Suna people from seeing that power since we were in a hurry. Even though they are our ally, revealing yourself like that could cause some issues later down the road. Hiruzen then raised his eyebrow at the blonde's growing foxy smirk. I doubt you'd need to be worried about that. We have something against them as well. With some information from Tamari-san, the fox was able to connect the dots about who's possibly the Suna's Jinchuriki. I would call that an even trade-off. May I hear your guess on who this person may be? Naruto looked slightly torn as he seemed to think for a moment. Before that, Tamari-san told me this in confidence, and I feel like I'm betraying her trust by revealing this. I just hope someone here won't use the information for bad things. The third's eyes flashed in anger at someone who would do this. His old teammate and warmonger, Danzo. He would be damned if he let this information find its way to that man. Actually, you know what, Naruto-kun? Keep that to yourself. I do not feel confident about keeping that information hidden from people who would use it for their own gains. Just promise me that if you meet this person or know he's nearby, especially in this village, you will inform me or someone you trust right away. We will take some measures at that time then. Naruto looked visibly relieved, happy he wouldn't have to choose between loyalty to his village and loyalty to a person who told him her secrets, even if it was inadvertent. The Hokage smiled as he leaned back in his chair. What do you intend to do with your training for this year until the next break? Naruto furrowed his brow in thought for a moment. The fox will be teaching me elemental jutsu. She said she'll start me off on nature manipulation training soon. Do you know what nature your chakra would be aside from the fire affinity you said you're gaining from the Kyuubi's chakra? Naruto shook his head. Knowing how to find out, the Hokage reached into a drawer in his desk and took out a piece of paper. This is a chakra paper. If you channel your chakra into it, it will tell you what your primary affinity is and possibly one or more secondaries. He explained as he reached across the desk to hand the paper to the boy, who took it and immediately began channeling chakra. The paper sliced itself in half with a sharp sound, and then the two pieces burst into somewhat intense flames. It surprised Naruto into dropping the pieces, and they burned to ashes long before they even reached the floor. The Hokage smiled pleasantly at this. It looks like fire and wind are both your primary affinities. Neither seems to be dominant over the other within you, so you will have high mastery of both fire and wind natures. This is a nice discovery since these elements are opposite of the other, and it's very rare for anyone to have these two elements together. He explained with some pride as he watched Naruto beam at this. We have plenty of expertise with fire jutsu, since that's the primary element of this village, but unfortunately we don't have much information on wind jutsu. There are only 2 people in this village with wind affinity. One of them is my son, Asuma, and he should be able to help you with this when he eventually returns from his tour of duty with the 12 guardians. Who's the other? Naruto innocently asked before he was surprised by a dark frown on his surrogate grandfather's face. Naruto-kun, if someone comes to you out of nowhere and offers to teach you wind jutsu among other techniques, stall for time and come to me. I do not want you to associate with the second person. His name is Danzo and that is all you need to know to stay away from him. The blonde couldn't help but nod nervously under the Hokage's hardened gaze. He rarely saw him serious like this. This Danzo had to be bad news then. No doubt the type of person that would assassinate another village's Jinchuriki for his own gains. That's probably why this old fart had you keep the identity of Shukaku's host to yourself. Your father was very wary of Danzo and spoke ill of him when he confided in your mother, like how that warmonger kept calling for the Hachibi's host to be secretly eliminated ever since that power was seen during the Third War. He's apparently someone that would do things behind the scenes to weaken other villages for the betterment of Konoha. Thanks for the information, Kurama. I'll keep that in mind, Hokage Jiji. The old man nodded, glad he got his point across. I have kept you here too long. I will let you get back to your business and have a good day, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled and waved as he left the office. As he walked down the stairs, he was deep in thought. I don't suppose you know wind jutsu? Your father was wind-natured too. I have seen him use quite a few in his spars with your mother. I may be able to help you recreate them from the hand seals I have seen, but beyond that you will have to find other ways of obtaining more. Despite the lack of information, this is a very good coincidence. What do you mean? Wind nature is perfect for anyone who uses bladed weapons. If you were able to find or create sabers that channel chakra, you will be able to make the sabers sharper and more durable. You may also be able to extend the blades with chakra or even generate sharp blades of wind to cut people down from a distance. That's pretty awesome. But I find it strange. What's that? The more abilities I find out about myself in combination with the power you're giving me, the more it feels like I'm turning into a deadly force of nature. If that's the case, then it's a perfect match for the meaning of your name. You did want to be the strongest shinobi around, so I say take the bad with the good. You aren't going to win by talking to your opponents. The FFT like I would be stupid enough to try that. 2 weeks later in a small village outside of Konoha. You want to what? A disguised Iowa shinobi asked incredulously as he stared daggers at another disguised person sitting across from him. They were sitting in a corner in a small and rowdy bar within this small village in the middle of nowhere. Don't make me repeat myself. I said I'm closing everything down. People in Konoha are getting too close to my trail. I can't risk allowing any more passage into the village while this is going on. They're not stupid and I'll be caught if I keep this up. The disguised Konoha shinobi fidgeted nervously as he glanced around the barroom for any possible tale. You stupid and coward. This is the only easy way we can get into that damn tree-hugging village, and you're denying me that. Just because they're flailing around in the dark for someone to pin this on. The Iwanin hissed harshly. I don't care. I can feel they're too close. Someone must have clued them in onto me, and now they're starting to focus their attention on the Chunin patrols, which is where I am now. I'm sorry but tell everyone else I'm not going to do any more favors for anyone. Goodbye. The Konohanin quickly stood up to leave. The Iowa stared after him with burning rage. Stupid and cocksucker. Now I have to go back to Iowa and tell them I failed to get in. At least I won't have to waste my time with this mission. I doubt I would have found anything about a possible offspring of that blonde monster, anyway. Outside, the disguised nin slowly made his way back to Konoha, deep in thought. I'll have to seal up the secret tunnel and make sure it looks like it hasn't been used in forever if someone did come across it. For now, I'll lay low and take up a second job, then leave the patrols a few months later, saying I found my dream job. Some time later in Naruto's mindscape. Kurama looked over a huge crowd of Naruto clones, while they seemed to be concentrating on one leaf each in their hands. She slowly walked along, her footsteps thundering among the clones who were unfazed by a huge crimson fox towering over them. Her red eyes eventually focused on a lone Naruto beyond the large crowd as he was going through some kata he learned with a saber in each hand. She admired the beautiful display of the sabers flashing and cutting through the air as he passionately went through the moves he learned. She walked up to the lone Naruto, her eyes still trained on him as she slowly circled him once, checking him out from every angle, before stopping to sit on her haunches when she was once again directly in front of him. A few more minutes of practicing passed before Naruto finally stopped and let out a tired sigh. He threw the sabers up into the air and they disappeared in wisps of smoke, they were obviously apparitions. He looked up at the fox with an expectant grin. I don't see any issue with your kata. Good job, Naruto. How is the nature manipulation going? The fire group's coming along further than the wind group. I think I might be able to burn the leaf now. Dispel the group slowly then try it for me. If you succeed, we'll move the fire group on to the next level." The boy complied quickly, dispelling the Kaiten training clones in groups of 10s. A few minutes later, he grabbed a leaf and held it up as he concentrated on it. The leaf burned completely in almost an instant. He let out an excited laugh while Kurama looked on with a satisfied grin. "Very good. For the next level, you will have your clones burn this," she spoke as she got up to walk over to a gigantic tree, one that positively dwarfed Naruto, at the nearby tree line into the large forest beyond. She raised one tail high above the rest, then twitched her body to get it in motion. The tail whipped out in a near-invisible blur at the trunk, and Naruto was shocked to hear a sharp cutting sound. For a moment, nothing happened, then the trunk suddenly crackled as the tree began to tilt, straining under the shift in weight. The tree fell in what seemed like slow motion and landed with a thunderous crash. It surprised the clones into stopping their training to watch in awe for a moment. Large tree. You will pass when your clones are able to burn a tree of this size completely in under a minute. Wow, sounds real easy. Naruto grumbled as he swatted away at the dust that the fallen tree kicked up, then created a large group of clones to work on the tree. "Naruto, it's important you have total mastery manipulating fire and wind, especially since they're the primary affinities. You need to be able to switch between the two on the fly. The more you push yourself on this training, the easier it will be for you to switch between them." Naruto nodded tiredly before looking over at the wind group. "Looks like they're about there too. It won't be too long before I can cut a leaf. Speaking of the clones, this gives me an idea for when you learn the jutsu. You have a built-in method for easily using combination jutsu." "Really? That'd be awesome. What will I have to do?" "Sometimes you can be a little dense. The idea's right there in front of you." The fox retorted with a sweat drop. "What do you? Oh, I get it now. I can do wind while a clone does fire, and vice versa." Naruto murmured as he smacked his forehead. "Or have two clones do the collaboration for you while you do something else. Many great tactics can be devised from this the more you learn different jutsu." "Great. What do I have to do for the next level of wind manipulation training?" "You'll have to create a large waterfall in this mindscape and have your clones try to split it in two." "Are you stupid with me? That's impossible." "Not according to your father. He did it when he trained his wind chakra. Dispel your wind group and see if you can cut a leaf instantly. In the meantime, we'll create a giant waterfall for you to practice on. Let's get to it," Kurama ordered, with visible glee in her eyes at tormenting her container some more. Naruto groaned in defeat and muttered something about slave driver fox. Some time later during the second school year. 11-year-old Naruto grunted as he landed on the dusty ground on his backside, nursing his just-punched cheek. He winced as he tried to block out the screeching of the girls surrounding them. "Sasuke-kun. You're so great." "Yeah. Put that jerk in his place. You're the only one in the class who can beat him, Sasuke-kun." The girls among the crowd surrounding Naruto and Sasuke cheered as the raven-haired boy stood victorious over the blonde, an infuriating cocky smirk plastered on his face. Naruto found that irritating and wished he could actually go all out against him. That'd teach the Uchiha and these idiots fawning over him. It made him feel a bit better when he saw Ino wasn't one of these girls cheering his defeat, but only just. "Patience, Naruto. You know why we're holding back here. The teachers and the imbeciles on that civilian council will scream bloody murder if you harm a single hair on this boy. You do remember what happened last time you hit him, I trust." Naruto growled silently as he remembered losing like usual that time, but still landed a solid hit on Sasuke, just because he felt like it. He was hauled off to stand before the civilian council and was growing angrier every time one of the morons opened their mouth to call for his removal from the academy because he was growing as strong as their precious Sasuke. He was grateful when the Hokage crashed the meeting and made the entire civilian council empty their bowels and bladders before fainting under his massive killing intent. Apparently, a mere advisory council called this meeting without his permission, so he had them all hauled off for a week alone with Marino Ibiki to ask if they were harboring any traitorous tendencies by blatantly undermining the Hokage's authority. Naruto sighed as he got up to dust himself off and listened to the instructor enthusiastically call Sasuke the winner like usual, and many girls flocked around him while he walked off arrogantly. Again, he was pleased to see Ino wasn't part of the crowd. Instead, she frowned and stared at Naruto with an unreadable expression for a moment before walking off in another direction. Was she upset he lost? Thought she'd be happy her Sasuke-kun won. She's this way only whenever I'm the one who lost against him. Who knows? I do not claim to understand a human female's thought processes. I guess she's not totally a fangirl like the others, she actually does a bit of training with us once in a while. Not as much as I'd prefer, though. In fact, she and the others always seem scared whenever I suggested going full out together. I think that's my fault. What we consider normal for your training would be considered inhuman by others. In fact, that freaky human with the thick eyebrows is likely the only one that can match our type of training. Naruto let out a brief shudder as his traumatized mind once again repressed all memory of the unintentional brainwashing one Mito guy attempted on him about youthfulness. At the end of the match, the class was over and the crowd dissipated for the day. The blonde turned to walk away only to find himself face to face with one Yuga Hinata's glare. Ino wasn't the only one upset about his defeat. He almost groaned since he knew this was going to happen eventually. Each time he lost to Sasuke, he could tell Hinata was growing more unhappy and frustrated as she had to listen to nearly the entire class fawn over Sasuke and not giving her friend any praise that she thought he deserved. He couldn't blame her since she had seen what he was truly capable of. Hinata-chan, don't say anything. Just be happy knowing I can kick this guy's ass 1,000 different ways if I wanted to. I just don't need the attention. He whispered as he glanced worriedly at Sasuke's group, making sure they were not overheard. I'm tired of seeing you acting like this. I know you have to hold back, but I cannot stand seeing that pompous Uchiha standing over you as if it was his divine right. At least just make him work for it. You did say Hokage-sama punished those in the council so they would not do anything now. Hinata hissed back a little too loudly, her lavender eyes showing irritation. Geez, and you were supposed to be somewhat of a pacifist compared to me. Naruto teased with a smirk. His friend didn't appreciate the teasing and puffed her cheeks angrily. What did you say, Yuga? The couple jumped at the new voice's intrusion and looked over to see Sasuke standing some distance away, his face in a mild frown. The raven-haired boy became more irritated when the confused duo didn't respond right away. The girls around him grumbled at Hinata for being called out by their Sasuke-kun. I asked you a question. Answer it. Surprisingly, before Naruto could retort, Hinata showed a defiant expression. Our private conversation is none of your business, Uchiha. Please leave us in peace and go back to showing off for your so-called friends. Hinata ground out with the perfect Yuga composure. Naruto could tell she really disliked Sasuke because she only acted like that toward those she considered detestable. The fangirls gasped and were now glaring daggers at her for telling off their dreamboat. I don't care. I expect an answer from you. You said this dope here was holding back against me. What did you mean by that? Boy, bastard. She said to leave us alone. You should learn to listen to a lady's request. Naruto cut in with a scowl as he stepped in front of Sasuke. Hinata had to blush a little at him defending her honor. Baka. Don't get in Sasuke-kun's way. Sakura screeched from next to Sasuke. Naruto winced and stuck a pinky finger into one of his ears. You know, just because we're outside does not mean you get to use your outside voice. Kami, even the deaf would complain about your voice. Sakura sputtered at the insult, too stunned to reply. Enough of this. Yuga, you will explain now. Sasuke growled as he reached out for Hinata's arm. Before she could prepare to defend herself, she was surprised to see his hand stopped by Naruto quickly grabbing the wrist. The Uchiha was just as surprised, too. Boy, didn't I tell you to listen to a lady's request. I'll teach you a quick lesson. The blonde spoke coldly with his icy blue eyes boring into the Uchiha's wide black eyes. It was a total departure from the usual cheerful and mischievous expression he had on all the time. Before Sasuke could register anything, he found himself tumbling along the ground for about 20 feet when Naruto flung him aside like discarded litter. Rolling to a stop, he gasped more in shock than pain, not believing what just happened. All the girls were stunned into silence, while Hinata was sporting a slight grin as she had to do everything possible to keep a truly vindictive smile from spreading. Let's go, Hinata-chan, before we draw any more attention. Naruto quickly said as he stormed past everyone while gently dragging his friend along, who was simply too happy to be holding his hand. Wait, dope. Fight me. Sasuke snarled as he slowly rose from the ground. Naruto stopped for a moment to glance dully at him. I'd love to put you in your place. Only Kami knows how much you really deserve that. I can't do it though. Why not? Afraid you'll lose to me even at your full power. Sasuke retorted with a vicious smirk, thinking he scared the dope. No, the civilian council you got in your back pocket tried to punish me for leaving a cute little bruise on your cheek a few weeks ago. Now, I have to hold back even more against you because they'll froth at the mouth about the very real possibility of their precious elite Uchiha losing to a no-name orphan like me. Now excuse me since we have to go. Jana. Naruto cheerfully said as he walked off with a blushing Hinata in tow, who was still in a daze about having her hand still being held by the one she liked, even if it was unintentional. Sasuke was too stunned at what was said that he just tuned out the girls murmuring around him. They were in denial, saying that blonde goof was lying to look cool, yet he had a feeling he was telling the truth. He clenched his fist while gritting his teeth at the humiliation of being dismissed so casually. A few weeks later at the Yuga compound. The Ashi had mixed feelings. The clan head was pleased, yet he was also irritated. The cause of this was happening in front of him as he sat outside on his rear porch overlooking his family's private training yard, watching his two daughters battle together against Naruto at the same time. Sipping from a cup of hot tea in his hands, he was glad that this boy's participation in the spars seemed to have made his daughters strive to improve themselves in long strides. On the other hand, he was irritated that, despite their improvements, they haven't been able to land a single hit on him. The children were at this for 15 minutes, and Naruto only dodged while keeping his arms firmly crossed against his chest throughout the spar. Hanabi was clearly frustrated, and even Hinata was showing signs of losing her patience as they attacked him in a flurry of punches and kicks, in which he effortlessly dodged. Naruto dodged a high kick by crouching under Hinata's leg, and the smaller Hanabi tried to capitalize by aiming a palm strike level with the blonde's face. He smirked before swinging his head to the left to allow the palm to barely graze across the top of his collarbone. He made an attack of his own for the first time in the spar as he shot both arms outward toward the girls. His left palm slammed against Hinata's hip while her leg was still up in air, and the right palm struck Hanabi's exposed side after she missed her attack. Both girls, already off balance from their attempted attacks, were easily knocked off their feet and they landed roughly away from him. He smiled before doing an impressive series of backward somersaults toward the rear porch before jumping and flipping over to land gently on the wooden surface next to Hiashi, who hadn't shown any reaction to his showboating. He then bent down to pick up his own cup of tea to sip it as he watched the girl slowly get up from his attack. "I am not sure what to make of your actions just now, Naruto-san." Hiashi spoke with a slight tinge of irritation at Naruto's perceived cockiness while he took a sip of his tea. "I've learned it's better to be a bit of a hard ass while training with people, Hiashi-sama. It'll force people to truly understand their own weaknesses and work hard to improve them. You don't see these two giving up anytime soon, right?" Naruto cheekily said as he indicated the two girls that recovered from Naruto's attack with dogged determination clear on their faces. Hiashi had to admit this boy had a natural ability to encourage and motivate anyone around him. "Okay. I'm going on the attack. Be ready," Naruto announced before he hopped off the porch and sprinted forward. He and the two girls immediately engaged in a flurry of punches and kicks. After a few minutes of dodging each other, Naruto began to force the girls back with well-timed counters that barely missed the girls only thanks to their eyes. The blonde then broke off the melee by suddenly hopping back away from the girls, surprising them into freezing and indecision for a second. Upon landing, he dashed forward at Hinata, a hand raised for a strike. She gasped at the blonde's increased speed and instinctively struck out with a palm strike at his chest for a counter. Hanabi tried to intercept Naruto with a sliding leg sweep in his path, but he surprised them both by jumping high into the air over their heads, easily avoiding their strikes. Landing behind Hinata, he swung around to throw a hard punch at her back. He was expecting her to dodge the attack easily since she could see him behind her with her eyes. He would then follow up with a surprise leg sweep. However, he was surprised when Hinata did dodge, but it was an instant too late. His knuckles grazed hard against her ribs when she could not completely get out of the way in time. He felt a little bad when he heard her cry out sharply in pain as she slumped to the ground, clutching at her side, but he noticed something odd and had to check it out. Naruto stepped back out of the way of Hanabi's sneaky flying kick from his blind spot and she landed clumsily in front of him, her back exposed to him for easy pickings. Deciding to test what he saw with Hinata, he carefully aimed a punch toward the left shoulder on her back. He was proven right when Hanabi dodged an instant too late as well and got the same nasty graze against her ribs. She cried out before slumping down next to her still recovering sister. He frowned. "Sorry about that, ladies. I'll give you some time to recover while I have to talk with your dad." He spoke with the frown still evident on his face. The girls looked curious about what was on the blonde's mind but nodded as they took their time recovering. He walked up next to Hiashi to pick up his teacup and once again took a sip. Hiashi remained silent, but he seemed to know what his fellow tea drinker was thinking. "There is a weakness with your clan's Byakugan, Hiashi-sama," Naruto declared, as if this statement was the indisputable truth before he set the cup down. Hiashi raised an eyebrow for show. "And what, pray tell, would that be?" "You already know. There's a missing chunk of the Byakugan's 360-degree field of vision located on the back near the center just behind the heart. It seems to be the same in both of your daughters, so I assume the rest of the clan share the same blind spot. It's not so big that a normal-sized fist can slip through the Byakugan's vision field completely, but it'll cause one to react just a slight bit slower. If any enemy knew this, they will aim their projectiles at that particular spot. Aren't you worried about anyone finding out? If I could notice it. You saw it because you are very observant and not many outsiders get the chance to spar with a Yuga on a regular basis, let alone several of us. As for our enemies, none of them survived long enough to figure it out, apparently because we have gone this long without that weakness becoming widespread knowledge. Now, I trust you will keep this to yourself, Naruto-san. The Ashi spoke the last sentence with a small edge in his voice. You have nothing to worry about. This goes to the grave with me, Hiashi-sama. Naruto replied just as seriously. At this point, the girls joined the men and were shocked to see that Naruto had easily figured out the clan's secret weakness. Their respect for him went up even more. Good. As for you, my daughters, both of you combined barely managed a slight graze on Naruto-san. I have to admit I am a little disappointed in that, despite his growing talents. You will need to work hard to keep up with him and Niji-san. Hiashi spoke calmly as he sipped from his cup, while the girls replied with a dejected yes, father. While he loved his daughters, he needed to be stern with them on their training. It was to motivate them to train harder in order for them to be able to protect themselves to the best of their abilities in the future. Actually, I noticed something about Hinata-chan that I think you should consider. Naruto pointed out while the girls took their seats next to him. Hinata turned her head toward the blonde in confusion. To be honest, Hanabi-chan is taking to the kata of traditional gentle fist faster and easier than Hinata-chan is. At this rate, Hanabi-chan will easily overtake Hinata-chan in just 2 or 3 years. Hinata cringed at Naruto's blunt observations. She had a feeling about that, but for that to be brought out into the open with her father made her nervous. She also felt a little hurt that Naruto believed that about her. Hanabi became downcast because she knew if this kept up, she could be made the clan's heiress and her beloved Ni-chan might get branded. I have seen all of this for a while now. I was going to have a discussion about that. Hiashi replied calmly, but one could detect a small hint of sadness in his tone about his eldest daughter's situation. Hinata looked down. Oh no, I am sorry, father. It seems the elders are right and I may not be qualified to take over your position in the future after all. Eep. She squeaked when Naruto bopped her on the top of her head very softly. Although it didn't hurt at all, she still moved her hands up to cover her head with an adorable whine and an ear-wrenching pout that made him feel quite guilty, but he persevered. Who said this doesn't make you qualified? We just have to figure out a specific workaround for you. The main difference between you and Hanabi-chan is that your body is much more flexible and limber compared to her more rigid body structure, which is what the traditional kata of the gentle fist are made for. Your body is having some slight trouble staying rigid enough when it's so naturally flexible. This leads to problems with your more precise kata. The Ashi nodded his head at the boy's assessment. Naruto-san is correct. Now that he has brought it up, I have been thinking about a way for you to be able to realize your full potential instead of being restricted by these traditions. This will cause controversy with the elders, but I will handle it. I truly believe you should branch out and create your own style of gentle fist that fits your more flexible body. I dare say if we can bring out your full potential with this, you may be able to match up with Niji-san in the future. The girls were stunned that their father would dare defy the clan's rigid traditions for them. Hinata was almost brought to happy tears to hear her father's belief that she could be as strong as her cousin in the future. Naruto smiled brightly, impressed that Hiashi already came up with some answers before he noticed a worried look on Hanabi's face. What's wrong, Hanabi-chan? He inquired, directing everyone's attention to the young Yuga. She shifted uncomfortably. It still does not change the fact that one of us will still have to be branded eventually, Ani-chan. Naruto frowned while Hinata wrapped an arm around her little sister to try to comfort her worries. That's true. No offense, Hiashi-sama, but your clan's tradition of using the cage bird seal is bullshit. The girls flinched at the blonde's bluntness with their father. Hiashi merely raised an eyebrow but did not say anything. I have been reading up on seals a little as a side hobby in my trips to the library, and I can already tell any decent seal master will create a seal to protect your clan's Byakugan even better without pain of servitude, and the seal can be applied on every single one of your kin, even replacing the cage bird seal already on them. The Ashi allowed a small smirk at this boy's growing knowledge with seals. It reminded him of his old friend Minato. I understand your view on this. I have never liked using the seal. The only time I ever did use that in recent memory was when I had to pry Niji-sen off your broken and bruised body 2 years ago. Hiashi smirked inwardly at the blonde's grumbling over the memory of that. This seal ruined a great clan prodigy's chance at being recognized as such, simply because I was born a few minutes before my brother. I believe it is time we change the way the clan works. The traditionalists would revolt at the mere mention of devising a new seal however, and I have to be careful about looking like I am upholding the traditions as the head of this clan until that day comes. The Ashi paused to take a sip of his tea. I plan on putting off the decision to choose between you two for the official position of heiress until when Hinata turns 16, which is the latest the clan laws will allow. At the very least the both of you will be able to avoid being branded for quite some time. It is my hope that someone will come up with a new seal before then, and we may force the changes within this clan, ones that should have occurred long ago. Hiashi spoke as if he knew who that someone would be and even inclined slightly toward Naruto. The blonde picked up on this and suddenly felt a small weight growing on his shoulders. "Why yeah, let's make the most of the time we have till then," he said with a nervous gulp. The girls didn't pick up on the blonde's light distress since they were busy being relieved that they still have years before they would have to worry about being branded. "For now, I think you should try again against Naruto-san. However, I wish to put a stake on this. If you manage to land a solid hit on him, he will stay for dinner and the night. If you do not, then, aside from seeing him at the academy, he won't be visiting here for a month," Hiashi suggested calmly, although he was fighting down a dastardly smirk. The effects were immediate as the two girls perked up, their eyes glimmering with glee as they could get a chance to sleep with their favorite teddy bear. Hanabi was even more determined because she did not want her Ani-chan to disappear for a month since she didn't have academy classes with him like her sister. Naruto cringed. Not the Jiken trap of horror. The two excited girls quickly got up to prepare to spar, only to be surprised upon seeing their target was already gone from his sitting position. They glanced around to find him running away at a speed that would impress a jounin. They ran off after him just as quickly, not letting this chance slip by, leaving behind a deviously smiling Hiashi. Needless to say, Naruto had to stay the night while being clutched tightly by the Yuga sisters when they easily found him cowering in the crawlspace under one of the branch houses. It was determined that, in his terrified state, he had forgotten that the Yugas could see through objects. Some time later at a certain dango shop in Konoha, Mitarashi Anko was sitting at her favorite patio table outside her favorite dango shop feeling worn down as she was absent-mindedly picking her teeth with a used dango stick. She was feeling so lethargic that, to the shop owner's shock, she didn't order as much dango as she usually did. After 2.5 years of being chunin, she felt like nothing had changed for the better for her. Her fellow shinobi still treated her poorly, and the villagers still glared and spat at her with hatred. To make it worse, her 17-year-old body filled out so well that she was already considered one of the most beautiful women in the village, and men were still going after her aggressively in an effort to be the first one to lay with her. Contrary to the wild rumors about her, she still was pure with zero body count. Despite her growing habit of using her amazing body to distract men for her humor or to gain advantages in battles, she still refused to let one single man lay a hand on her intimately. Any man that tried ended up nearly beaten to death. That was another thing she hated about being associated with Orochimaru. Some men believed she deserved to be treated like a whore just because she was his former pupil, and they grew angrier the longer she refused any advance. She was worried that eventually one day some men would snap and try everything they could. After all, how could they pass up a chance to make a beautiful woman like her into a whore that didn't charge any money? Enko shuddered at the thought. Despite using her assets to tease men, mostly for spiting them in the end, she found herself rather shy and scared about the idea of naughty. She had to fight back embarrassed blushes at mere mentions of dirty words like carrot and flower, among others. Even now she still ran out of the apartment she shared with Yugao, like just recently today, whenever she realized her sister figure was going to have her boyfriend over for some intimate fun. She didn't want to stick around to accidentally overhear something through the walls. Although, she was getting better and getting used to that. Anko looked forward to ending her tour of duty with the patrol soon and get right into her next assignment with Marino Ibiki in the torture and intelligence department. Now that she was going to be able to work in one place for a long period of time, she might be able to form better relationships with her co-workers when they got past their initial prejudices and realized she wasn't what the rumors made her out to be. It would be a long process, but she believed that was what she needed to move on beyond her relationships with Yugao and Kurenai in order to possibly make more friends. She was broken out of her thoughts when she saw a flash of golden blonde hair pass by on the street bordering the patio. She smirked. She hadn't seen that brat in a while, and maybe some quick company might get her out of her lethargic mood for a little while. "Boy, Gaki," said Gaki. Flinched as he stopped in his track and slowly looked behind him to see who would call out for him. Anko had to hold back a blush upon seeing these beautiful deep blue eyes and rugged whiskers. He certainly grew some in the time since they last saw each other. Shaking it off, she waved her hand, beckoning for one Uzumaki Naruto to come sit with her. Seeing a beautiful purple-haired older girl waving him over, the blonde looked confused for a minute as he turned around and walked closer before realization hit him. "Oh, you're the one E-san that saved me from that guy 2 years ago. Wow, has it been that long ago? You certainly have grown quite a bit since then. Please have a seat if you got some time." Naruto grinned as he took the seat across from her at the small patio table. Anko had to wonder just what this brat was eating and doing to be able to get such a fine-tuned body like the one he had now. He was wearing a black tank top with loose burnt orange shorts, and the outfit showed off incredibly toned muscles everywhere. He was clearly training to be a shinobi, and she could tell he already developed well ahead of his peers. Anko fought back another blush at the thought of him in the future after he matured some more. You're certainly not that weakling I had to save last time we met, Gaki. It's obvious you're training to be a shinobi in the future. Yup. Now I have 1,000 different ways of kicking that man's ass all over the street now, so no need for your help anymore. They're not going to be able to do anything to me now. Naruto exclaimed as he puffed his chest out in pride. Anko smirked. Who's your sensei? It's clear you're ahead of everyone your age by a long shot. She quizzed as she signaled the owner for another order of dango. I'm sorry, but that's classified. You're a chunin, right? He confirmed, indicating the chunin flak vest she was wearing over her tight white t-shirt and black miniskirt. The Hokage was strict about that. Anko frowned. She had to admit she wondered just what was so special about this kid. Her roommate, Yugao, mentioned this blonde occasionally, and she was secretive with some of the details about him. While Anko was deep in thought, Naruto quietly observed the environment around the two. He was not surprised to see the usual glares, but what surprised him was that the glares didn't seem to be aimed at him exclusively. It did not take him long to realize some of the glares and whispers were directed at the woman sitting across from him. He had a feeling she did not have a reason to deserve the looks, same as him. She felt somehow similar to him in some ways. Is there anything you can sense off this one Isan, Kurama? Like if she's a host like me? I would be able to sense that even from here inside you, but I do not feel a familiar signature. She's not a host. However, there is a somewhat odd signature coming off her, as if there was something else piggybacking on her chakra. Beyond that, I cannot tell. Thanks. You're still a big help. Is something wrong, One-san? Naruto suddenly asked as he looked at his table companion quizzically. Anko was jolted out of her thoughts. Anko? Mitarashi Anko. That's my name. I don't like the One-san thing. Oh. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. Nice to meet you, Anko-san. Naruto slightly bowed from his seat. Anko smiled mischievously. Sorry, but I'm still calling you Gaki. You look like one, and I know about your reputation as the village's prankster. She had to chuckle at Naruto's pouting. Would you rather be called Naruto-chan? Or Naru-chan? You still look that much younger than me. She teased with a half-bowed smile as he shot her an annoyed glare. Gaki is fine. He grumbled. A moment later, the shop owner brought over a tray of dango and set it down in front of Anko, who was eyeing them hungrily. The owner looked over at Naruto, who flinched and expected to be glared at, but was surprised when the man bowed. Welcome to my shop. I have to thank you since you've improved my favorite customer's mood. I was getting worried she was not feeling well. Naruto did his sheepish gesture, while Anko shot the owner a slightly annoyed look for prying. Thanks. Would you like to try something from this shop? I'm sorry, owner-san. I just ate so I'm full. Thank you for the offer, though. Naruto politely inclined his head. The owner smiled and inclined as well before returning inside the shop. You ever had any dango before, Gaki? It's the food of the gods. Anko declared as she munched on her first stick. Naruto immediately showed an affronted expression. Boy, that is not the food of the gods. Ramen is. Oh, Kami. Not this bullshit again. Hush, Fox. This is an important matter. How dare you, Gaki. Ramen doesn't hold a candle to these magnificent spheres of deliciousness. That's because you haven't tried the ramen from the Ichiraku stand, apparently. They make the best ramen in the entire nations. Fine. I don't normally give anyone even a single piece of my dango, but I will allow you to have a bite of this just so you'll understand just how much better than ramen this is. Anko challenged as she held out a stick with one dango remaining on it. HMPH. If I don't like this, then you have to promise to come with me straight to my favorite ramen stand and try a bowl there. Naruto shot back as he grabbed the stick. Anko frowned before she gave a reluctant nod as he slowly put the dango into his mouth. Anko watched on intensely as he closed down on it. Hot. The blonde yelled as he reflexively removed the dango, but the stick slipped out of his grip. Both gasped as they watched the dango stick flip end over end in slow motion through the air to land some distance away on the street. They watched in stunned silence as a bird flew in and picked at it to try to lift it. Not being able to, they swore they saw a tick mark form on the bird's head as it turned around to empty its bowels over the dango in retaliation. The two gaped as the bird flew off before seeing a pedestrian step on the dango, and it stuck to the sole of one of his shiny-looking shoes. Oh damn it. These shoes were new. The man cursed as he reached down to remove the dango and tossed it high into the air. Naruto and Anko's heads followed the dango as it went up in an arc toward the shop's rooftop. It landed and rolled down to the gutter right into a drain pipe leading down. The two listened to some slight rattling as the dango bounced down the pipe before popping out into an alleyway next to the shop. It rolled up to an overflowing garbage can and tapped against it. The very slight impact was enough to cause some of the disgusting garbage slop to ooze over the lip of the can and land on the dango in a small pile. On that cue, a huge mass of chittering rats appeared from every shadow and nook to converge on the pile. After a few seconds of noisy and disgusting eating, everything was gone along with all the rats. Anko and Naruto sat in stunned silence. After a tense moment between the two, Anko creakingly turned her head to face Naruto with a blank expression that caused him to sweat comically under her expressionless gaze. To his creeping horror, her aura slowly changed into one of extreme rage that promised a painful death. Should I run? Yes, you idiot. Run like a bitch. Naruto immediately launched himself out of his seat using the armrests and flipped backward over the back of his chair. Two thrown kunai embedded themselves deeply into the backrest. Naruto whimpered as he noted the two kunai would have struck his heart and spleen if he'd sat there an instant longer. It's just food. No need to go psycho on me over that. He shouted as he turned around and zigzagged acrobatically up to the roof of the dango shop, leaving distressed outdoor patrons, overturned patio tables and chairs, and several tossed weapons in his wake. You dared to desecrate and waste a precious dango in front of me. That's the death penalty for you. Just be happy I'll make it quick, you damn gaki. Anko shrieked angrily as she hopped over the table to follow Naruto up to the rooftops, her kunai and shuriken flying in the direction of the retreating blonde. It took an hour, but Naruto was able to finally hide from the crazy lady long enough to lose her. As Anko grumbled and stomped off upon not finding the brat, she had to admit meeting him improved her mood considerably. She then began humming and almost skipped happily in spite of glaring villagers as she headed home, her depression pushed back for a while longer. Before Naruto leaves for another training trip. Hokage's office. You called for me, Hokage-jiji. Naruto called out from the office door as he slowly opened it. Hiruzen perked up from his damnable paperwork and beckoned for him to come in. Yes, Naruto-kun. I was hoping to have you meet an ex-student of mine before you leave tomorrow. He should be here any moment. The third thought he saw something flash in Naruto's eyes for an instant. Oh really? He wouldn't happen to be Jiraiya-sama of the Sannin, would he? Oh, you got it right on the first try, Naruto-kun. Not many people usually remember that I was the sensei to the Sannin before they became famous. This time, Hiruzen knew he saw something on Naruto's face, as the boy seemed to smirk evilly for only a split second before schooling his face in a neutral expression. He wondered just what this boy was thinking. He didn't have to think about it long before he saw a whirlwind of leaves appear in the center of the office. The tall middle-aged man with long and wild white hair and a ponytail, a green robe and pants with mesh armor underneath, a red haori over the robe, gray gauntlets on his forearms, and a giant scroll on his back appeared out of the whirlwind. His face, marked with some kabuki-style paint, flashed a brilliant smile as he goofily twirled his ponytail around. His heavy wooden jetta clacking loudly on the floor, he began doing a weird dance with kabuki poses and announced in a loud voice. Men fear me and women swoon over my manliness. Hailing from Mount Myaboku, I am the legendary womanizer, the great hermit toad sage, the ever-gallant Jirurk. Jiraiya's announcement ended with a strained cry of pain as the tall man's eyes bulged out before he slowly reached down with both hands toward his precious package. It took a moment for anyone to notice that Naruto had moved behind the white-haired man while he was dancing and somehow procured a long stick out of nowhere. It was apparent he took a powerful golf swing with it into Jiraiya's prized jewels. The third was too stunned to say anything. Awesome. This stick not only works on a Kumonin, but on one of the Sannin too. The blonde exclaimed gleefully, as if he hadn't just hit one of the most powerful shinobi in the elemental nations in the Nads. Jiraiya groaned in extreme agony before collapsing into a twitching heap, both his hands covering his jewels. The third was about to angrily demand that Naruto explain the reason for this when he was stunned by a growing look of cold fury on the blonde's face as the boy walked around into Jiraiya's view. The white-haired man looked up him through bleary eyes, still in pain. Hello, Godfather. Naruto greeted in a dead and quiet tone. Hearing Godfather in that tone made both Jiraiya and Hiruzen flinch violently. This is to thank you for leaving me alone for all these years, not even bothering to check up on me. The boy finished. He glanced over at the stunned Hokage. Sorry, Hokage-jiji. I'm pretty pissed so I'll be going somewhere to cool off. I'll be back later. Before the old man could stop the blonde, he was surprised to see the boy do the hand seals for Shunshin and disappear in a swirl of black and orange leaves. That would have impressed him if he didn't have to worry about the situation at hand. Sensei, he knows. How? The toad sage's voice still remained strained as he slowly rose himself off the floor, one of his hands still gingerly protecting his balls. His sensei waved his hand dismissively in the air and they felt the shocked hidden Anbu guards leave the room at once for privacy between the two. I didn't tell him. The only explanation is that the Kyuubi must have told him and he kept this hidden. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at the mention of the demon fox. Then that means he must know everything else too. One evening at the Yugas. That damn bastard, putting me up like a prize to be won. Naruto grumbled quietly as he sat on the couch, trapped. The Yuga sisters had seized onto his body as they slept quite peacefully at the moment. Hinata was sleeping in her favorite position, in which her head was on Naruto's lap with her arms tightly wrapped around his right thigh. Hanabi cuddled up tightly against his left arm. Naruto sighed at his predicament and resigned himself to his fate for the night. He looked at the girls' cute sleeping faces and smiled slightly. It's not that bad. I'm getting a little sleepy myself anyway. Before the boy could doze off, though, his ears perked as he heard footsteps nearing. From the light steps, he figured it was one of the servants. Oh, how cute. An unusually cheerful female Yuga exclaimed quietly as she entered the room. Hello, Tomo-san. Sorry I'm still here so late. As you can see, I'm stuck. Naruto greeted as he looked over his shoulder at a long-haired and beautiful Yuga woman. Despite being in her 30s, she did not act or look her age, as she seemed to be more like an energetic 20-something woman in the prime of her life. It is alright, Naruto-sama. I do not mind. You know you are a very popular topic with all the women in this clan. Really? Hinata-chan keeps telling me that, but I didn't believe her. Well, you should. Lady Hinata and Lady Hanabi are so lucky they get to be comfortable like that with you on a regular basis. Maybe I should join in. Naruto twirled his head back at the servant quickly, almost snapping it off in the process. Why you don't have to do that. He whispered nervously, trying to move, but froze as he realized the Yuga sisters were preparing to strike at him with their Jiken if he moved anymore. Oh, but I want to. Tomo trailed off as she stepped up behind the couch where he was sitting. He swore he heard some panting. You would not mind a very pretty woman like me cuddling up to you for a moment, would you? The servant teased almost seductively as she bent down and slowly wrapped her arms around the comically sweating and reddening blonde's neck from behind. She rubbed her slightly pink cheek against his very bright red one as she sighed contentedly. I don't care if I get in trouble for this. This is worth it because you're so warm and cuddly. She murmured as she seemed about to drift off to sleep despite still standing bent over behind him. Naruto groaned inwardly. Can this get any crazier? His answer came when Hinata began to stir and was unknowingly moving one of her hands precariously close to where it should not go. Damn. Not that again. Inside Naruto's mindscape. Kurama found it hard to believe, but she had to admit to herself that she was actually worried about Naruto. The giant demon fox pondered over this rare emotion as she slowly walked on all fours among gigantic trees through the large and dense. She had one destination in mind, the presence of Naruto's overflowing chakra directly ahead, and the fox could tell from her link with him that the small blonde human was extremely angry. She only felt worried like this once when Naruto ate that shy girl's bento of doom. While it would be easy to chalk that up to being simply concerned for her own life, since she was linked to her host's lifespan after all, she'd be lying to herself. Kurama finally decided that she had come to care for her container a little bit. She would never admit that to him anytime soon, if ever. Not too long ago, she watched Naruto take his anger out on that old pervert and then disappear to the Hokage monument to hide so he could come into the mindscape and let out some steam. She was rather intrigued when he suddenly appeared next to her in the mindscape and only spared a glance toward her before running off into the dense forest. She decided to follow after him after an hour of not hearing or seeing any sign of him. Breaking out of her thoughts, the giant fox began to hear sounds of clashing metals and she realized, with some irritation, what he was doing. If you guys are still listening to the story, it means you really liked it. I am glad, and all I can say is please complete 100 likes and 50 comments for the next part. For now, you guys can watch this video. If you guys have any idea or wish for the next story, please recommend me in the comment box.